Ready whenever. Up ahead of, okay. Yeah, I'll call to order the August 10th Public Works meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Alderman Waggy.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
All
Okay.
members-
We'll move to approval of the agenda. I think Alderman Gould's going to make a motion to change some stuff around just so we can get some people that have to leave out of here.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to move new business item 9A up before, I guess, before the report of Alderman, Chair and Alderman, and as well as the SWT Parks Master Plan presentation. Is that correct?
Second, sorry.
All right. Any comments, any questions? Thanks. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We'll go to citizen comment. Anyone? Okay, we'll move into now the new agenda, so 9A, code enforcement.
Okay. All right, good evening. For those that I haven't met, I think I've met all of you, but just in case, I'm Stephanie Carr. I'm the Special Zoning Counsel, and I've been Zoning Counsel since 2008 for the City of Brentwood. So tonight, we just wanted to have a brief philosophical discussion with you regarding code enforcement. So I do a lot of code enforcement for our firm's client cities, and I speak a lot about this. Last year, if any of you were at Missouri Municipal League, I gave a talk on code enforcement to the elected officials who attended the annual conference in September. And so I do think it's a good idea for elected and appointed officials in a city to every few years kind of examine the approach that we have to code enforcement and determine if any changes need to be made. And by approach, I mean, you know, how proactive you are, or if you're just merely reactive, or, you know, what tools you want to use, what tools you may not want to use, that kind of thing. So in the past, it's been a while since we've had a philosophical discussion about code enforcement, and some issues have arisen lately where we've had to kind of go outside of our normal procedures in order to abate some nuisances. And those nuisances presented true health hazards for the neighbors. We were getting a lot of complaints, and so we kind of went outside of our normal procedures. So we thought that this would be a really good time to have this philosophical discussion. So in the past, what we've done is we've probably relied on municipal court summonses more so than any other tools in the toolbox. And you do have different tools available to you to abate nuisances and to address building code violations and that kind of thing. We've probably relied on municipal court more so than anything else, and more so than probably what some other cities do. Also, we've tended to, when it does come to using other tools like nuisance abatement, and nuisance abatement, first of all, not every code violation is going to rise to the level of a nuisance. A nuisance is something that presents a real health hazard, such as, let's say that there is an unfiltered pool in the backyard and it hasn't been used for years, but it holds standing water or stagnant water. So that presents a real health hazard because that breeds mosquitoes. Mosquitoes carry disease, that kind of thing. There could be a nuisance that causes a great deal of odor and it impacts the neighbors on how they use their property, that kind of thing. So when I talk about nuisance abatement, I'm not talking about all code violations. I'm talking about only those code violations that carry some health risk to the public. And so, you know, when we've looked at nuisance abatement in the past, we haven't always used that tool, but we give more notice, we allow for more time than what some other cities do. You know, we've taken kind of a slower approach. I don't know really how to say it, but usually we go through the court system. That may drag out for a little bit of time. Sometimes we use nuisance abatement, sometimes we don't. When we do use nuisance abatement, we tend to give more notice than what's legally required, and we tend to take a much slower approach and give the property owner a great deal of time. A couple of the complaints that we've received recently is that we're not acting fast enough, especially with nuisances, and that we should move quicker to nuisance abatement rather than relying on the court so much, and maybe get in there to abate the nuisance, before so much time drags on. So this is really a discussion that we'd like to have about philosophy. Would the elected officials like to see us move faster toward nuisance abatement? Would you like to see maybe some type of program established where we go out, and especially recurring problems that we've seen over and over again in the last few years with respect to the same property? Would you like to see us develop some kind of program where we go out and we check those periodically, and we're not waiting on a complaint, to move forward with some kind of action? We don't need a complaint in order to either issue a citation or to move to nuisance abatement, depending on the condition. So really, this is a chance for you to ask me questions about code enforcement, about tools that we have in the toolbox, about what we've done in the past, what we could possibly do, and then that's going to allow Whitney, the code enforcement officers, and me, and I do consult with them on these matters, to maybe develop some more procedures. I think that we've already developed a great procedure just in the last month or two on being able to go in and making sure that we have all of the required notices and the required administrative search warrant to go on and do nuisance abatement. I do think that we have a really good procedure for that, but whether we need to maybe develop some other programs. And did you have anything else, or does that?
Yes. We do drive around and check those problem properties that we've had complaints about in the past, but that's generally for the high grass and weeds. So for the non-nuisance abatement for the high grass and weeds, we have the sticker that we've been using to give people 5 days notice. If they still don't abate it, then we have to send a letter giving them another 5 days. But in that, we have worked with Stephanie to determine, especially if they're chronic offenders, that this will serve, in the letter it has to state that this will serve as your only notice, and the city will abate it when we feel the need and bill the homeowner, and if they still don't pay, then we have to put a lien on the property.
Right. And that one notice is for the same growing season, and so that's allowed by state statute. So for high grass and weeds, we send the one notice, but we have changed that notice to say this is the only notice that you're going to get this summer or this growing season. So if it occurs again, which there are some properties where it occurs over and over again during the same growing season, then we'll go out there and abate it, without further notice. That's one change that we've made.
But it is important. I know some residents have said, well, we have had to complain every year. Well, state statute does say it has to be per growing season, because we can't apply if you received a notice in the previous year because of when things died down, winter, we can't reapply it. So we have to start the process every year. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody questions, comments?
Comment.
Yeah, I have some too, but I'll let you go first.
So I generally think this is really good that we're moving forward. There has been one of the issues that has been a recurrent issue in Ward 1, and you went in, gave the shorter notice and abated it, and the neighbors were so happy.
Just to further explain on that one, that did not require the search warrant because the property owner gave the code enforcement officer, made the comment, I don't have anyone to help me, and he was saying, if you give us the approval, we can do it, but we have to get a search warrant if we don't have the property owner's approval. So that's how we were able to proceed quicker on that one, because she or he gave us the approval to just go ahead and help her.
Right. So anyway, I think in that, and that has been an ongoing recurrent problem that the neighbors have complained about. So I think in that situation, it was really good, and I certainly applaud I think it's reasonable to use the shorter notices and not go to municipal court because it could be the whole growing season when you go to municipal court and wait for the property owners to do something. So I guess my one question is, when we give people this extra time, do they actually solve the issues that they've been cited for, or
Generally, yes.
generally, yeah, okay.
We've recently cited someone to remove a dead tree, and he's like, the homeowner was, I'm trying to get someone out here, but the wet weather is delaying it, so we're like, well, just give us a time frame and we can inspect it after the fact, or have the contractor call us so we know when it's gonna be dealt with. We had a homeowner saying, well, I'm out of the country, can I get another 10 days? So we try to work with the homeowners. I think that's been I'm searching for the word. That's been the issue, is that then residents don't feel like we're moving fast enough, but we're trying to work with the homeowner so they do it. So our grass cutting can be much more expensive. And so we prefer to have the homeowner be able to address it themselves.
Yeah. So I definitely think in those situations where like, if somebody's out of the country, they can't fix it, and we should not, and they say, I'll deal, I'm gonna take care of it when I get back in the country. Like, I don't think the city should be going in and doing it. So I don't know, maybe you need to develop procedures that we could all look at to make sure that we're not unduly penalizing people in those situations.
Right.
And the other thought that I have is with the grass, I'm not on SUSCOM, but I know coming out of sustainability, there's this new move of no mow April or no mow May. And if if something comes from there, I wouldn't want this to conflict with something
Right,
that is a different policy that comes out of a different committee. So I want to make sure that this is, like, we're dealing with true nuisance situations, or like the one that it was just dealt with in Ward 1 was a true nuisance situation that has been ongoing for years. And it was great that it was abated by the city. So,
If the board does want us to consider, like, no mow May or things like that, that would definitely need to be a direction from the board, so we know not to do code enforcement on the grasses at that
Right,
time.
right.
So,
Spoiler alert, get ready.
okay. I think some of our code enforcement might be happy with that.
But then they could be enforcing different, like dead trees or
Correct.
things that are really truly more, or hazard, or the stagnant water in a pool that
Yeah.
probably cause a greater concern for damage other than high grass, which is, some people might consider unsightly or against the code, but it's not gonna hurt anybody if the grass is 5 inches tall, so.
Our current code says 7 inches.
Oh, 7 inches, sorry.
Cutting it really short.
Yeah. Okay, so,
Since you brought up dead trees, we do get a call, just for your education, we do get a call for a lot, oh, it looks like it's dying. And our code, the property maintenance code says is if there's any growth at all, it could be half dead, it could be just cut. But if they're showing any leaves or growth, that the code enforcement still considers that a live tree, and we can't force anyone to take that down. That is a common question, so I thought I would just raise it since.
good, okay, thank you.
Good.
I think so.
Yeah, we certainly could change the ordinance to address diseased or staff or consult with us like an arborist.
And we have,
diseased or
yeah,
dying.
yeah, we have also done that. But generally, if there's still growth on it, it's not, property maintenance code is kind of gray in that area, so.
But, I mean, I hear a few like grass things, but I also hear, maybe it's just a Ward 2 thing, but a lot of derelict properties, potentially abandoned. Stephanie, I mean, you mentioned being proactive versus reactive. That was more on the abatement side, not, I mean, Whitney, we don't wait for a complaint if we see a property like that, if somebody notices that, or do we wait for a resident to complain?
It's a combination of two. I mean, if it's outside property maintenance, we can go and check on that, and we do drive, our code enforcement officer retired, So Corey Reed has been taking on some more of that to drive around and check the problem properties. So if there's obvious building issues from the exterior, the law only allows us to view the property from the front sidewalk or from the public right-of-way. We have to have permission to go onto someone's property, to look in the backyard, to go into a home, or we have to proceed with the search warrant, but we can only go in once we're invited, and that's either if there was a medical emergency and the police or fire say, you need to come and check this building, but we can't just go in on our own.
Now, if we notice a lot, let's say that it is a chronic issue and we notice a lot of things from the outside, then we could definitely, that's probable cause for an administrative warrant, especially if it's vacant. And maybe we need to pay greater attention or turn more attention to the derelict structures as opposed to so much just on the exterior.
Yeah, I mean, we had one house that the garage door was, halfway open for years. And, and I know it's abandoned now, but we didn't know that. Nobody knew that. I mean,
Yeah, and they've tried to close it. We've been monitoring that one. We do have it on the rotation for mowing. My understanding is the property owner died, but we don't know who's currently paying the property taxes. So until we can figure that out, we don't know exactly how to proceed with just having it torn down at this
yeah,
point.
I mean, we've
We
had,
can- that's
cars with flat tires are in front of houses for a long time. I mean, but I guess my question is, are we waiting for a resident to complain about these things before we start code enforcement, or are we?
No, we try to, it's both, really. We might not always notice how long a
Right.
car is parked, because we do circle, but the city. So it's really a mixture of both. There are some things that we may not see, especially if it's in someone's backyard. We may not always know, oh, there's a car, but it looks,
Right.
as we're driving, yeah. So on some of those things that we do rely on complaints, but we do circle the city to check.
Question, so on the derelict vehicle issue, so let's say that you do have a vehicle that's, for some other reason, derelict. So we would probably start with the summons in municipal court and that kind of thing. How fast would you like to see us move to, because those are nuisances, even the Missouri courts consider them, how fast would you like for us to move beyond the municipal court citation route and go into nuisance abatement and possibly have that?
I mean, I think, from the time you notify them that something's going to happen, I think you do give them a little bit of time, but it can't be, forever. I mean, I agree with working, there might be extenuating circumstances, there might be some reason, but, I think, another 6 months is too long.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you asked about philosophical question, right? I mean, philosophically, I think that the longer we take and the more slow and relaxed we are about enforcing code, the worse things get, and the more people kind of just get, well, nothing's really going to happen to me. So, I mean, we do have some complaints over and over in Ward 3 about some folks that people believe are hoarders, and they start to, they go and clean up their backyard, but then all of a sudden it's all over again, right?
Yeah.
Or, habitual trash cans being kind of left toward the front of the house, can't even get to the side of the house because there's so many, weeds that have invasively overgrown the area that, neighbors just kind of get fed up, and they continually feel like they have to come to the city. And their question is, why can't the city be more, get on top of these things before it becomes so terrible, right? If we're waiting for somebody to complain, by the time they're complaining, it's already gotten to be a pretty terrible situation. And so, no, I don't think we need to be super fast on people that have 8 inches of grass. But if you start seeing, severe or we know that there's plantings that are not really plantings, they're just invasive weeds and honeysuckle and whatever, and we know those are gonna just take off in the growing season, we have to probably be on top of them pretty quick. So I just think the sooner, it's just like crime, right? I mean, if you're kind of relaxed on crime and you just let it, well, you're just growing more crime. So you kind of have to have a philosophical, sense of, we're going to get on this when we know it's going to be a growing season that's going to be an issue. So,
Well, I do appreciate those comments, and those kinds of comments are exactly kind of what I think we wanted to hear. And I don't want to, I don't want to give any unreasonable expectations, because there are processes, and you've got to give a certain number of days notice, and then we've got to give them an opportunity to be heard.
Sorry, could you move a little closer to the mic?
By the by a representative of the city. So you've got to give notice and an opportunity to be heard. So, that is a little bit of time, but, I think that there are ways to address those in a, more time-efficient manner. And so I think that that's what I'm hearing tonight.
yeah, and I think so. And does this have anything to do with code enforcement along like commercial corridors like Manchester Road and all that? Are we talking about that now, or is that?
Yeah, that's all part of it. So this is also another issue that we've seen in the past. Specifically stated in the code, it does not specifically state that the adjacent property owner is maintaining or mowing public right-of-way. Lots of other cities do include that. Most people just do it because they want the public right-of-way to look, they think of it as part of their home as well. However, we have had a few people that have I want the specific wording in the code, or I'm not doing it. So we say, well, we have these 3 sections, and in 2013, there was a text amendment proposed to actually state it more directly. That failed. And so my question before you tonight, is that something you would like us to consider adding?
Well, I mean, as it relates to we haven't really seen a lot of the, let's say landscaping buffers that we have now along Manchester Road. So I think this is a bit new for us as a city. And I guess, I'd like to think that along the right-of-way of the road, there'd be some consistency. And I don't know how we manage that without.
Yeah. Now, I will say that for Manchester and the MoDOT is supposed to maintain and mow that. However, it's part of their normal schedule, so they don't really do it as frequently as the city would like to. There has been discussion, I believe, to have the city take that back over, or for the most part, the adjacent property owners have also been maintaining it. The enhanced landscaped islands is something that the city or the adjacent property owner, I believe, is responsible for. But once we have to get that agreement with MoDOT, or we either make it harder that the property owner maintains that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that the property owner would maintain it. I understand why that would be the case. I just think we need to, if it needs to be harder worded in the code, then that's, I think, what we need to do. Somehow it needs to, I don't think we can allow some properties to be nice and clean, and then just adjacent to it, weeds 4 foot tall. And we're seeing that all up and down that corridor right now, and that certainly wasn't the intent. I guess the question that I have is when the landscape design was done for Manchester Road and that enhancement, did those property owners have any say what was put in there on their right-of-way, on our right-of-way, but their technical property? Because I can imagine if it were just a patch of grass, okay, fine, that's easy to mow,
Right.
unless the rest of your property doesn't have any grass at all, then you've got to now like come and mow a little strip. And then the other part is, if I didn't have a say in the trees or the plantings that were put in, the beds that were put in, and now I've got to go and weed all these things or keep them pruned. You know, it may be interesting dynamic. Like I didn't want that there, right? I mean, so those are the bigger questions. So I think we need to figure that out.
That's not the assumption. The only reason why we're entertaining entering into an agreement with MoDOT would be at the direction of the Board of Aldermen, because we want the area to continue to look great, given all the investment that has gone on there and with the potential for what Green Street is yet to do. So that's why we've asked them that when they complete their project, because we have more investment in that area, the city would entertain taking it on. Over the years, the city has had a lot of discussion about other areas around the city that either St. Louis County is responsible for or MoDOT's responsible for, even areas that are in York Village, where those residents would like the city to take on that. And so who takes on that? Our park staff is taxed as it is. So if we're going to take on all those additional work, either we're going to need to add more people or we're going to contract it out. So right now, we haven't fully explored what it would cost the city to take on the Manchester Road corridor, but it's been expressed that you want us to pursue that. So that's the only reason why we're going forward at this point with the Manchester Road corridor.
I would say, I know Stephanie has to leave at 6:30, so if, any questions for her? We have 2 minutes.
So
Okay.
I guess I'll ask a
But-
question. Are you all going to come back? Is that enough direction for you, or are you going to come back with something concrete to look at, or?
I think that's pretty good direction, and I do appreciate the discussion tonight, and I feel like we've gotten a direction for us to talk. And then I'm certainly happy with coming back.
And I assume we can still talk about weeds after Stephanie leaves. here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
'Cause I have some more things for Whitney on that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate you.
thank you.
I actually raised my hand because I have a weed issue, so.
Okay, go ahead.
So I agree that we want to keep Manchester Road looking pristine, but then is this a slippery slope that then once we start taking over some, then, so, I mean, the practice is you keep track of the grass.
They only mow twice
Twice a
a
year.
season, two to
Twice a
three times a
season.
season, or a year. But if you complain loud enough with Dan's assistance, sometimes we are able to have them come out. But what other cities have done, because despite complaining they don't come out, some cities have entered into agreements to take on that responsibility, like at 270 and, Olive.
Olive, yeah.
Creve Coeur has taken that on. So there are areas in Richmond Heights that they've taken that on. So it's a discussion for this board as well.
What about Brentwood Boulevard? So there are weeds coming up through the sidewalk. There's not grass. I mean, you
Yeah.
would expect the business owners to take care of that, but they're not.
We send out notices, especially where maize and wheat, we've had a history, not with them, but previous, businesses there. And when we get the complaints, or if there's a tree growing out of the storm drain, then we address it, different things like that.
Yeah, we have sent some compliance letters to the property owners along South Brentwood Boulevard. We did contact county, and they do not maintain that.
Okay.
So it is under the assumption that the adjacent property owner would do that.
And sending out the compliance letters, is that something that you do once you receive a complaint, or is what would allow us to be more proactive so that we're not hearing complaints about it or seeing it and saying, okay, guys, we got to do something about this,
No.
so that it becomes a little bit more,
Right.
we're on top of it before people even are on us.
Like, the ones we've sent out recently were at staff initiative. So we haven't gotten a lot of complaints from the public of that yet. um, so we do try to keep on top of it. Obviously, with our short staff right now, you know, we're very busy because it is the height of the construction season, so we're really booked. But Corey has blocked off some time on Monday mornings and Friday afternoons to just be able to follow up on code enforcement cases until we have a new person in place. And then Scott assists with all of the nuisance abatements. He has experience with that elsewhere in the requirements per court law and state law, so.
And because it's so dependent on staffing, when we're short-handed, do we have any other levers that can be pulled for bringing in consultants or other entities that can help us with either construction permitting and checks, so that then, you know, code enforcement, or are there other companies out there that can do sort of code enforcement under contract?
So we have entered into a contract with IVTS, which went to the board at the July 17th meeting. Getting up to date on, we're trying to get through all of the permits in the backlog, and he's proceeding with reviewing those. He is taking on the inspections needed for the Brentwood Park playground, the destination playground. He's finishing up a project for all of that, so which should be ending this week. So once he's done with that, he could take on more, help us get more up to date with the not code enforcement, but the permit review. And he's getting familiar with the MyGov system. So that's where we are with that, but we haven't had him, we wanted him to focus on those areas first and then that's why Corey has stepped up, and Scott, you know, when they see something with high grass and weeds, to be able to go out and address those as quickly as possible.
I also want to manage expectations. The fact that there will be a time, unless you really hire the maximum number of people you can for this position, that there will be a time where staff will single-handedly be able to identify all code enforcement issues throughout the city. It's impossible. We partner with the police department, and we can easily bring it up at the management team meeting, that as they're driving around, since they tend to drive really slow, you know, that maybe when if they're not pursuing someone, that they help us document that, and then remind our employees, because every now and then I specifically go out looking for nothing but code enforcement issues, and then I just write the addresses, take pictures, and share it with the department. I haven't done that since Whitney's been here, but there was a time when I was doing that. So unless you're adding more personnel to the department, I think it's a partnership between residents and staff and aldermen and alderwomen to bring all these items to our attention.
I think leveraging some other departments, or even the you know, I know that the trash, the people that pick up trash have a lot of things to do, but I'm certain they could, if they were
Yes.
trained of what to look for,
Right.
they'd probably be able to, you know, and they're on every street and
They probably see it first.
they'd probably see it first. So I like the idea of getting it outside of just one person's responsibility to, you know, but making it a departmental thing, or interdepartmental thing. And then, you know, I think the other complaint that we hear too is that sometimes people get code enforcement letters, and then they say, well, what about the weeds that are on city-owned property? And, you know, I mean, so I think we have to be better at setting the standard as well, and either that or write our own code enforcement on ourselves.
I will say, I've also driven around and I'm like, okay, I need you all to check on this property on my lunch hour as well. So we're kind of all out there. It's really out of need, and because our code enforcement officer was working part-time, the position was moved to part-time, but it really needs to be a full-time job. The city has a lot of
Nodding back there.
like, I'm sure they're nodding back there. So that is something that we would like to probably bring up at budget time, so.
Yeah, Nancy?
So I guess along Manchester Road, I feel like there are two issues. There's one issue is the maintenance of the new plantings, which isn't really an issue yet. So I would sort of propose, let's see how the property owners and MoDOT take care of it and address that when it's a bigger issue. I think the other issue is there are properties that are abandoned at the moment and they look terrible. Like I turned the corner the other day from Hanley onto Manchester going south, and I'm like, they cut the grass at the corner. Like it was transformational. But then I walked down and I drove down, and well, on the south side there were several other buildings that had grass. So I feel like that's a very different issue that is really code enforcement. And if we could
Yeah,
clean
and
that up,
Corey-
let's see how the MoDOT and property owner situation goes before we. I mean, I'd like to see that happen before the city talks about whether we should take it over, because then I feel like that's just a domino of a lot of other property in the city.
Corey has met with the property owners and like, okay, just what you did was not sufficient. You need to go back out. So they went back out on that one property at the corner of Manchester and Hanley. And then we were, actually the Fort Taco location in the Sonic, they were like, oh, we're out of the country and we don't know that, we thought they were being mowed by our company, so we'll get on it. So yeah, so they now know that they're to get on the rotation for that. So
And I agree with you, but I think that some of the new planting areas are getting out of control already. And I think if the solve is to make the code more specific, to say it is the property owner's responsibility to maintain, then that so we don't set a precedent. I mean, I think we just need to take that up. I guess I'd like to see what that would need. Obviously, would need, I guess, a rewrite to come to this board, correct? And to amend the code, and then it would have to go to the Board of Aldermen? So I'll make a motion to direct staff to amend the code violation, the code for code violations, having to do with commercial property and right-of-way maintenance, and bring it back to this board for review.
I'll second the motion, but could I ask
Amend
you to
it?
amend it and include residential properties too? Because
Yeah,
it
sure.
seems like it should be consistent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea just to clarify, because if you have to find 3 other pieces of the code and piece together like why you have to do it, then it's not clear.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. All right, so Whitney, I know you've got a staff report too, so we'll get to some of those other stuff, I think, when you come back up.
yeah, okay.
Thank you. All right, next we'll go to the SWT portion, so we can stop paying you to be here.
Evening. Jay Wolschlager with SWT Design. It's good to be here with everyone. I think we'll continue the philosophical discussion. So but we'll turn to Parks and Recreation. Oh, there we go. Get me back up there. All right. We're on a screen here, but what we want to do tonight was just give you an update on where we are with the overall process for the master plan, share with you high-level kind of schedule, what we've been doing. We have some preliminary feedback, both from the open houses we had as well as the online survey, and then just kind of get if there's any general thoughts or comments from the Public Works Committee standpoint with regards to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Just have a little conversation at the end, and any thoughts you have on kind of what, from your perspective, is going to be important that we're keeping in mind or thinking about, maybe what your thoughts on a successful and an implementable plan might look like, just kind of putting the hat on of Public Works Committee, what that looks like. And we'll share with you on the schedule here that we'll be back several times as well throughout the process. So this is just the first of several updates that we'll provide you as we go through the overall process. So, so I'll keep going. So in addition to the agenda, we did have a couple of things with regards to goals for the plan. We have 5 goals that we've set up for the master plan. The first one is really wanting to establish a foundation of the existing parks and recreation system. So not just the physical components of it, but kind of how it is performing, even looking back to existing planning that's in place that sort of sets the targets and the goals for the parks and recreation system. So we really want to create that foundational piece on which we're building and moving forward. The second one is we want this process to be really input and public driven. So we'll talk a bit about that plan, what that looks like, but we really want this plan to be founded on input from the community. That's staff, that's residents, that's park users, as many people as we can get involved into this to create that driver for what the Parks and Recreation System wants to look like going forward. The third one is, to remember, those two I had going on top of my head. But we also want to think about a 10-year plan. So we're looking at 10 years and beyond. So it's not just addressing what are maybe current issues or needs and desires, but thinking, let's look at those, but then think about what does Parks and Recreation look like 10, 15 years from now for the city of Brentwood. Hey. And we'll go from there. So.
Was on for a second. Press that button.
Are we back up? Share. Let's try this. Good. Not it working too soon. Yeah, it was up there for a second, right? Well, it said it was ready to.
They're pulling that up. Is this presentation in our board docs, or is this just Eric? Okay.
We can provide it.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. All right. I won't flip ahead then. I'll be forced. I'll be forced to watch.
Yeah, no, it's only going to be on the screen. So. Sure. Sorry. All right, we're back in business. There we go. The cover slide. So this was the agenda which we covered. So we'll kind of give the overview of the input so far received, and then spend a few minutes just having a conversation. I did skip over this slide a second ago or talking, but we did want to kind of introduce the project team to you. Be up there in just a second. So SWT Design, we are the lead firm for the team. So myself, Scott, Chantal, and Bree will be, you've seen us at a lot of the meetings already. I know you've been to several of our events. So we're leading the team with a real focus on the parks, the outdoor spaces, the overall organization and leadership of the process. But then we also have two key partners with us on this project as well, both of whom have experience with Brentwood and Parks and Recreation in the past on the facility side. So Ballard King and Darren Barr, their focus is on the programming and operations and a lot of the indoor spaces. And then Reed Voorhees with R4 architecture. So Reed is looking specifically at the community center and the other structures within the park system from an architectural standpoint and a use standpoint. So, Reed and Darren are working closely on that space, and then we're overlapping and coordinating together on the overall system as a whole. So, I was talking through the goals here a second ago, talked about the overall comprehensive understanding, really thinking about those needs of the community, making it input focused. We also want to be thinking about not just the existing and developed parks and trails, but the other park land that is currently in the inventory, and really the opportunity to bring Brentwood Park into the conversation about what everything looks like going forward, as well as the undeveloped park properties that we'll be getting input on and have already gotten some good input on and incorporating that. And then we talked about wanting to be sort of forward focused and thinking holistically about the park system and all of the other components and overlay that go into Parks and Recreation, and then that being the 10-year guide. So, oh, we are gone again, aren't we? Wants to rethink. So those are the 5 goals, or kind of guides, if you will. And then the process itself is set up into 5 phases.
Eric, do you have this, and could you put it in board docs if you do?
But is it running off of it? I'm going to save it to the desktop here. We'll work with what we got here. Why don't you just hold that? Maybe the bad luck is up here at the podium. Yeah. All right. So on the right-hand side of the screen there is kind of the process that we have. Mentioned it's 5 phases. So data collection, community engagement is the second phase, which is really overlapping the entire process. It runs beginning to end. Then we have needs assessment, then recommendations, and then the final master plan. So to this point, We really worked through a lot of the data collection. We've been finalizing a few stakeholder engagements and cleaning up a few items there. The community engagement, we've already started. We started with the opening at Brentwood, and we're continuing to move forward. I mentioned stakeholders is the key one there. The other component in community engagement that now that we called it an online survey, it was really a feedback form online. Now that we've completed that and we're kind of synthesizing the feedback that we received, we're going to use that as a basis for a statistically representative survey. So that's what we're going to start building here over the next few weeks, probably month or so, and that will be something that's a little more focused on what we wanted to collect. So instead of doing that up front and just asking a bunch of general questions, we thought we'd use the sort of informal SurveyMonkey format to just get an overarching feedback, and then we'll hone in with that statistically representative survey to confirm some things. So needs assessment is really where we're moving it. We lose it again? Oh, there we go. So the needs assessment is kind of where we're transitioning into now, and that's where we're really going to take a lot of the data that we've gathered and start to really think about what are those common themes and how do we start to structure this plan going forward, followed by using that to build recommendations and then finalizing the report. So, which you may have seen a second ago, and maybe can no longer see, but both in that needs assessment phase, phase 3, and in the recommendations phase, phase 4, those are the two additional points that we would anticipate coming back to you and sharing how we've moved along forward and some of that information at that time. So, so just to show you some of what we've been starting to develop and kind of the data collection side of things. Okay. So we started to build some mapping and really starting to inventory the parks and the indoor spaces. So what's up there now is kind of one of the maps we've put together that shows the city with the park locations highlighted and called out. And then we photo inventoried as well as had conversations with park staff. We did tours of all of the parks, really for our team to do an assessment and understanding of the parks and the facilities, as well as to talk with staff about what's working well in each park, what are the challenges, what are the sort of the needs and the desires that we want to be thinking about as we go forward, and overlaying with that or adding to that the public input as well for each park. We're also looking at connectivity and trails, so using the existing trails as well as the trail plan and input that we get from the community about connectivity. And really, I think there's a lot of excitement about connectivity. I think people recognize what's already present within the city and the system, but with the connection now under Manchester to Brentwood Park and that connection to the larger GRG system, I think there's a lot. We heard even in that first open house, a lot of excitement about what that could lead to, and then got some really good feedback on just some concerns and opportunities that community would like to see explored with the existing system as it is. But so that's a key component, goes hand in hand with parks and recreation, is that trails and connectivity piece. And then I mentioned this up front, but we're not starting from scratch. We're not forgetting everything that's been done in the past. We really want to take what's been done previously from a parks and recreation standpoint, as well as holistically from a city standpoint, and use those as tools and guides through this plan. So we're going back and looking at the previous parks and recreation focused master plans and really having the conversation about what's been accomplished, which is a significant amount of the previous plan has been realized. So we want to make sure we recognize that and let the community know what's been done, as well as finding out what's still relevant from those plans and maybe what isn't as important now as it maybe seemed 10 years ago. So from a parks and recreation standpoint and a trails and connectivity standpoint, we're there. And then also wanting to align with the comprehensive plan and finding opportunities to sort of parallel what's in that plan when we think about parks and recreation. And then we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of these other ones as well. But so that's from a schedule and a timing standpoint, we're really started about in June to really kind of kick things off. And we're looking at an early 2024 completion, probably late winter. We got some timing with that survey that we'll need to kind of play out, and there's some stakeholder outreach that we're still following up on. So we'll be able to wrap everything up kind of after the first of the year. So So that's where we are kind of holistically. And now we wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the key elements and some of that input that we've already received so far. So.
You all have heard us talk a lot about sustainability. It's obviously a really important component of this project. There are efficiencies that are gained to, a lot shorter than you. There's efficiencies that can be gained to cross-reference the sustainability plan over the entire park system rather than individually apply it to projects. And so that'll be a part of what we're doing, is really looking for opportunities to implement sustainability plan and looking for other sustainable opportunities as well.
Right. I'm going to go over kind of our plan for community engagement throughout the project. We know that this is going to be critical to the success of the plan. So as you can see here, we have several different methods of obtaining feedback from the community. So one is online presence. So we set up a project website, and we're using that to share information about what we're doing throughout the project. So we'll post summaries and information that we've developed throughout the project. We're also using it as a
Should we be seeing a different slide than sustainability? Hold on, it's
Looks like
dimming,
it's
it's
thinking-
dimming.
Yeah,
We're in the
it might
slide
be-
transition.
Might be losing connectivity. Is it a rather large file? Lost. Need a dongle, yeah. It's not you guys. It's, you know, we have this happen quite often, actually.
All right, I am on slide 9 there. Can you guys see the community engagement slide? Okay, so online presence, we have a website, and as I mentioned previously, we're posting information throughout the project. We're also using that to post the surveys, information that we've provided, and notifications about events such as open houses. Um, In addition to that, we're also conducting stakeholder meetings with several different groups. You know, we're meeting with strategic partners, user groups. We've already met with some internal city groups, and I'll kind of review that in a little bit as well. In addition to the community survey that we've already conducted that Jay mentioned earlier, we're also conducting a statistically representative survey. We have a specialist in our team that's going to help us prepare and conduct that. And that's going to be used to kind of verify and expand on what we're hearing from the community engagement through open houses, as well as the stakeholder input that we're receiving. We also have 2 in-person engagement events planned, and these are more geared towards intercept engagement, so we'll be meeting at kind of already planned community events where we know we'll get great attendance. The goal isn't so much about presenting about the plan as it is about informing about the process, increasing participation, and then we'll be gathering more feedback focused on the plan and what we're producing as part of the plan, and progress updates at the community engagement meetings. So the open houses that we have planned, we have 3 of those planned. One we've already conducted more focused on the data collection that we've been doing. One that's going to be focused on our needs determination, so that's the next one we'll be attending. Then we'll have one to kind of review the draft recommendations of the report. And then lastly, we'll be meeting with you all. So this is our first of 3 meetings with the Public Works Committee to kind of provide updates and share with the feedback we've been receiving throughout the process. Slide 10.
Can I ask a question about this statistical survey? How do you communicate that to the community so that they don't get confused thinking, oh, I've already participated in a survey, I don't need to do that? Or do you reach out to folks that have been engaged again? How do we make sure that they know it's a new survey? And make sure you're up at the mic. Sorry.
One, we'll message that. We'll use the online tool, and we'll find social media to get that information out. And secondly, the way it's conducted is that it's mailed out with a letter that goes with it, so we can work with that consultant to kind of write that letter so that the individuals who get that survey can understand that it's not the same thing they've already done, that it's the next step in that. And so, and we haven't worked through the details with them yet, but typically it's administered either in print by mail. People will receive it and they can fill it out and send it back, or there's usually a web link with that. So if they would prefer to do it online, then they can log in, and it's all address coded and zip coded, and that's how they're able to ensure that we get the responses that we need to get to be statistically representative across the city. So not everybody will get it.
Okay, that's what I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
so not everybody will get it. It will go out to a certain number to start with, and then based on, I think they kind of see what type of return they get, and if after a certain period of time they don't have the numbers that they need, then they will send out another round to more individuals. I think that's how it works, but we'll confirm that with them when we.
Those that are selected, is it equally spread out through all wards?
Correct. Yeah. Well, I think it's weighted by population and wards. I don't think it's to be representative of the distribution of population through the city. So it's not an even number, I don't believe, across all wards. I think it's more based on the distribution of the population across the wards, but we can.
Yeah, I mean, all the wards are pretty evenly distributed as far as population size. So, but I think it's important to make sure that all wards are sort of equally represented as.
And that would be the intent. Yeah, I think that's part of, and I think they look to do it not just pure numbers wise. I think they also look demographics and try to get the distribution in there as well. So.
Okay, great. It looks like we've got another way to see this.
Sure. Yeah, so the company that is going to be preparing that with us and administering it is called ETC Institute. They're out of Olathe, Kansas, and they've been in this market and doing these types of surveys for decades. I know we've been working with them for over 20 years. So in addition to being able to administer this survey for us and for the city, they also have a database of all the other surveys that they've done, and part of what they can do then is cross-reference. So sometimes we'll give them some benchmarking communities that we want to sort of cross-reference with, or they've just got a whole cross-referencing report they'll put at the end. So we'll get the sort of the peer data, if you will, that's specific to Brentwood, but then they'll also be able to give us some cross-reference tabulations that show how it compares nationally, how it compares to other benchmark communities. So we have, because of their experience and what they do and how long they've been doing it, there's a lot of additional resources that they provide that we can tap into. So, so we'll be able to.
Jay, I wonder, there are about 13 communities that the city benchmarks against for compensation, for instance. We went through a process to identify those 13. Is it possible for us to add them to the list in addition to all the others that we benchmark against because they're doing, greater best practices or things like that?
Yeah, I think if there's a list that we can use and we can see how many of those they could use, the other part is Ballard King can use that list as well, because then they look more at the recreation offerings and some of the other recreation side of things that we'll want to assess, and we can use those communities to benchmark. And if they don't have their information published, we'll try to reach out and get that information from them.
Eric has
But,
that list, so.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we can do it, Bola. Thanks.
Yeah, if you can give Eric a slide number, he can
Yep,
Or
I'm on
whoever's
slide number
controlling this.
10. Whoever's controlling that. 10, number 10. So this slide is, this is kind of a snapshot, some screenshots of our project website that we have set up. So on the left is the landing page. You kind of see that directs you to, at the moment, some overview of the master planning process, some of the inventory that we've developed for the existing parks and undeveloped parks. We also had a link. I believe the survey that we had up there is closed now, but we have a link to the online survey that we conducted initially for the project. And we'll keep posting information to this website as we keep moving forward with the plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Brianna Coleman. She's going to give us an overview of the feedback that we heard with the first open house and some of the community survey.
Hello and thank you. Yeah, so I would like to kind of briefly recap what we've been hearing from the community so far. These kind of engagement events and community online surveys should really kind of be considered an extension of open house events where we're providing kind of an extended opportunity for community to provide feedback specifically on an online survey. This first slide that we're looking at kind of begins to describe our engagement event where we attended the grand opening for Brentwood Park, spoke to well over 100 participants at that grand opening, and got a lot of really good feedback. Our first open house later in the month of June was attended by about 40 to 50 people, so still a really good turnout for an event like that, and really hearing a lot of consistent themes. In these events, we were asking people what they loved most about Brentwood Parks and Recreation and what they might suggest for improvement or what could be better. When we're thinking about what is really successful currently, we're hearing a lot about walkabilities, trails. We're hearing a lot about the current maintenance of the parks, well-kept and beautiful spaces, and hearing a lot about the community benefit of those parks. So people being able to meet with neighbors and really kind of enjoying participating in their community. As far as items that could be better, we're hearing a little bit about some amenities or facilities perhaps being open longer in the day or the year. Heard a couple of items about shade and trees. We think that that's specifically referencing Brentwood Park at the grand opening where it was a little bit of a warm day. And then kind of hearing other items such as opportunities for seniors and adults or intergenerational programming, a little bit about safety or crossing concerns with trails and streets, and then again, a little bit more of that amenity area. Particularly our favorite response from Luke, age 7, who would like to see more wild animals, perhaps cheetahs in the park. We definitely got a good laugh out of that and continue to reference that one throughout our planning process. You move to the next slide. This is where we're beginning to dive into some of the information that we're receiving from our online input form. Is we had kind of talked about our statistically valid survey before. I'd like to make sure that the distinction is clear here. This is kind of an extension of an open house. So really we're asking the same questions that we would at an open house event and providing that online link to try to get more feedback. In this case, we had 272 participants, so being able to kind of broaden that participation really helps us begin to understand what the community is looking for or asking for in terms of these questions. I would like to draw your attention that over 80% of our survey respondents were Brentwood residents, so definitely something that we like to see, the people who are most actively using these parks. With the exception of Ward 4, a pretty fair distribution of these responses is kind of a quick demographic sample, but definitely something we're happy to see that we're really getting responses from the people that are using these parks. The next slide, please. Something that I think is really important to note or highlight is that we asked members which parks they were visiting, particularly within the past 12 months, and you'll notice that 4 of the parks have over 50% response in terms of who has visited that. Now, only 2 respondents skipped this question, so the current kind of state of parks is that they're really, really being used very frequently, at least by those who are responding to our survey. And then the kind of graph over to the right side of the page is just how long we had that survey open. So right from the grand opening of Brentwood Park until about mid-July, with pretty consistent responses. And that was in thanks to a lot of social media pushes. So really providing a lot of opportunity for feedback and certainly allowing us to kind of begin to move through a lot of different responses. So we'd kind of just like to highlight some of the main takeaways from the park. Again, pretty consistent with what we were hearing at open house events or other community engagement events. A deep appreciation for the trails and connectivity and the beauty that's maintained in these parks. Definitely a note of a wide range of different programs and amenities that is kind of spanning a lot of age groups. We're really hearing a lot about that sense of community being very important. Some of the convenience and access to nature, especially items like Oak Tree Park, are definitely appreciated by the community and often highlighted as positive elements. And then kind of some of those areas for improvement. Occasionally we're hearing about maintenance, so that's one that's people are very proud of and people are suggesting room for improvement. But some of the issues we have with flooding, particularly at Brentwood Sports Complex, and then beginning to look at perhaps some new amenities. Pickleball is all the rage, age-appropriate equipment, or beginning to diversify some of the opportunities for different age ranges. And then especially connectivity and safety and pedestrian access is always something that we see as a critical component for what people would be looking for in a park system. And that was for the existing parks. In terms of the undeveloped park property, we are kind of looking at new ways that those can begin to connect to parks. A lot of people noticed that it was the several different options that we had at Mount Calvary, the Lewis Park extension, the Hanley Court park property are pretty conveniently located and kind of begin to supplement some of the existing park territories. Concerns, as usual, would be traffic or lack of parking. Those are ones that are always cropping up in cases like this. And then also kind of beginning to think about what that maintenance might look like, potential flooding, the lack of shade, pretty much the usual suspects. And then I can turn it over. We'll begin discussing our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis that we've conducted with various stakeholders and team members.
So we've met with 3 stakeholder groups so far. These were internal to the city. So we met with the management team, the recreation staff, and the parks maintenance staff. As you can see, we kind of had some discussions on through the SWOT analysis, but in addition to that, we kind of focus in on some discussions as far as what do we see as the future priorities moving forward with Parks and Recreation. In addition to that, we also asked about what was kind of they saw as the success, what would success mean coming out of the planning effort. Then also looking at what are potential relationships and partnerships that we could explore as part of this plan as well. Next slide, please. So some of the kind of main takeaways and recurring themes that came up during those discussions. One was opportunities to expand marketing efforts, so things like branding and also expanding partnerships. So you kind of see on the right of that slide there, that's a list of some of the partnerships that were discussed throughout the meetings. The ones that were highlighted were ones that we heard at all 3 meetings. In addition to that, we also heard that there's a strong social media communication presence as existing. So there's a lot of engagement going on already with the community, promoting events, promoting awareness of various programming. In addition to that, there's strong connectivity with and walkability between the park system through the greenways and trails. So we'll want to make sure with this plan that we're not only preserving that, but improving that as well. Another common theme we heard was space and equipment needs for operation and maintenance. So there's limited storage space, aging equipment. Also, dedicated parks and recreation staff. So there's a lot of helpful, responsible staff members that have a diversity of skills that really kind of helps set the foundation for the operations and maintenance of the park system. And then also kind of just in general expanding awareness of the parks and recreation system. So through continued social media and other avenues, kind of expanding on the programming, amenities that are available, educating the public through parks on sustainability and what the city is capabilities and are for operations and maintenance kind of moving forward. So with that, slide, and Jay, I'll turn it over to you to kind of go over the next steps.
That's kind of the snapshot of where we are at this point. I think, we've had a lot of good feedback on all fronts, and really what we've been focusing on this first, couple of months is trying to get as much feedback and as much input as we can. So we're really looking to kind of finalize that now. We mentioned we've got a couple of stakeholder groups that we're still coordinating with to get some feedback, but we're really in a good spot to start compiling all of that, pulling some of those messages that we were just talking about that we're hearing across all fronts, the public, staff, what are some of those things that we're seeing as well that are sort of rising to the top? And that becomes that foundation for at least part of that statistically representative survey to dig a little deeper, because we know and even when we're trying to be as broad reaching as we can, we're still getting input from individuals that really want to be a part of the process or that are kind of maybe focused on what we're doing. So with that survey, we can get a little more, we can kind of validate or find out a little bit more about those things and get a little more of that really citywide response. So that's what we'll look to do, and then start to narrow down into that needs and opportunities assessment side of it. So I think overall, I think you saw it probably in those feedback, it's been a very positive round of engagement, both on the public and even internally. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten is how well departments and internal departments work together and sharing, really thinking about ways that they can support one another. And then even outside of Brentwood, some of the shared resources that are done through the Park Cooperative and even some other larger sort of inter-cooperative agreements that are setting up, that Brentwood is a part of to really build on. But with all that positive, we are seeing some of those recurring comments that are across the board that we want to dig into a little bit more when it comes to just capacity to manage and maintain things, and especially if we're thinking about expanding or growing what's offered or getting into new markets of offering recreation services, is the structure there to support that? And we have to dig into that some more and kind of find out, part of it's defining that vision, and then part of it's also being able to establish how we accomplish that vision. And so those are the things that we'll be looking at as we move forward in needs and opportunities and into the recommendations section. So we're excited about where we are so far. We're looking forward to kind of next steps. And so kind of finishing up tonight, we did want to have a few minutes to just get any thoughts and comments that you all have as the committee, that either questions about what we're doing or just general thoughts on what you would be looking to see in this report. And we'll continue to kind of update you as we've talked about as we go forward. So with that.
Anyone? Well, I share Alderman Gould's concern about just the confusion of somebody who, because we've done I believe, a really good job of like putting signs out, take this survey. And so people, I think, are, know that we're pushing it. And so if they got another letter, I think they would probably, if I got one, I would probably think, oh, it's the same survey, I've ever done it. And
yeah,
crash.
I think that's a very good point to make. And I think we'll make sure we coordinate that quite a bit with what's going out from a survey administration side, and then what we can do through the website and other social media channels and websites to make sure people are aware that it's the next step. It's not the same thing. Yeah.
Right. And I really like, the deliverable being the, 10-year plan with prioritize and, explaining how we got there. I mean, we've had that in previous plans, but that is a really good document that we can go back to over time and, as we're budgeting, and this is the next thing we need to go after and go.
We definitely want a plan that doesn't just sit on a shelf. We want it to be usable, implementable, and something that anybody can pick up and be able to understand what's in it and find things easily. And so if it's not that, it's not no matter how successful the process feels, if the document isn't useful and implementable and beneficial, then it's not a successful process. So
would it have some form of estimated cost or some magnitude of cost on those as well?
Yeah, probably magnitude of cost is where we'll be, depending on to what level we get to with the recommendations. But we always try to give some level of costing for just the budgeting side of things, to be able to be looking out, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years to start slotting things in and knowing where we need to be. That's also helpful from grant writing and some of the other partnerships, some of the other mechanisms that are out there for funding, implementation, the capital side of things, as well as we want to make sure we're also thinking about the operational side of it. So there's kind of both sides to that conversation when it comes to implementation. Everybody loves to see things get built. It's making sure that everybody's aware of, okay, what do we need to do now to make sure it's just as exciting and lives up to what everybody expects it to be, or establishing those levels of expectation. Hey, this is a field, but it's going to be maintained at X level, and everybody understands that if we want to do more, then what does that look like? And so make sure we're just transparent in those conversations too. So.
I guess just kind of a question, in your experience doing these, I think you said it was 272 people participated in the open house and surveys. With a population size that we have just around 8,000, I mean, were you pleased to have that many? Is that good?
Yeah, we were, yeah. It's really hard to tell what kind of response you're going to get. Not only did we have the 272, but a majority of the respondents, we asked a lot of open-ended questions. I mean, what we showed you was a very, very, very summarized version of all the responses we got. But so the number of people that actually responded to a majority of the questions was pretty high as well. I mean, some people are going to go in, they have a park that they use, or they have a park that they're going to answer those. And, right, they're going to only answer that. But we did have an overall good response. And that's why we try to pair something like this with the open house, with the, in this case, it was Brentwood Park, some of those informal outreach events that Scott was talking about, where we try to be as broad reaching in the feedback as we can. And so we use it as something like this, not as, okay, this is the direction, but this is a starting point. This is an assumption. So it was a good response. That percentage, that number of people responding was a good starting point.
Okay.
And because I think and I don't remember the number, but even the statistically representative survey is only going to be several hundred responses. I think
That was my next
that
question.
will qualify
what
it
percentage
as,
do you
yeah.
need to make it statistically?
And I don't remember what that is, and they'll kind of look into that with us, but it's not a big number. It's a fairly small number. Yeah.
300 was in the presentation.
300. Yeah, there you go. That's
Yeah,
I couldn't read it. And it was over there.
So yeah, that's how they, with the other factors that they put on it, that 300 gives them that comfort level of saying that I think it's like 90 to 95% representative or something like that.
And is it fair, since you're selecting addresses and sending it out, we may hit an audience that perhaps didn't participate in the just open call for responses.
That's the hope, is that we're getting individuals that, I think the people that have participated now are the ones that are most interested in what we're doing. And the hope is this survey will go out to people that maybe aren't as aware of what's going on, or just weren't as motivated to participate, but would take the time to respond to the survey. So we're getting even the people that maybe aren't interested, we'd like to get their input too. One of the questions that's usually asked is, if you're not using parks or facilities, why not? What are there things that are missing? And they give options to pick from. So it starts to tell us as much about who's not using them as who's using them, so we can be thinking about that.
Whereas the previous one was a little bit more open-ended, does this get more specific?
Yeah.
Like this, so the responses, they're not worried about responding because they don't know what to say, but you're giving them
it's very much a quantitative survey where they have a set selection of, there may be one or two where they can write some things in sometimes, but most of them are, here's a list, pick from this list.
Got it.
So
Cool.
that they're, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I may add, related to this survey, if you remember the discussion we've had at the Communications Committee, so it would be the same company, ETC, that would be asking those questions that the Communications Committee would like for us to ask our residents, the 3 or 4 questions.
Thank you.
No, I have no questions. It's exciting to see the progress, and look forward to watching it unroll the next few months.
Yeah, we're excited. We're off to a good start for sure.
Okay, thanks, Jay. We'll see you at the next time.
Just add two really quick things is, first of all, we do want to talk to the Board of Aldermen. I know a lot of you guys came out to the open house, but we'll be talking through BOLA to see if there is a need to bring you guys as a group, talk about what you'd like to see specifically in the master plan as one of the stakeholders. I know we've had a lot of pre-board meetings, after board meetings, closed sessions, but maybe that's something we could do and get the whole group together. We'll be talking to you guys about that. And then the other thing that I'm kind of excited about, which, you know, one of the things that SWT can do is work on a kind of a department-wide maintenance plan, especially as it relates to the new master plan. As you know, maintenance is a big concern of ours. In the last master plan, I think the overarching theme of that last master plan was our parks were not well maintained. It was something difficult to hear as a new parks director, and it's one of those things that we've taken a lot of pride on in improving the look of our parks. We know there's still work to be done, and they're not perfect. And Brentwood Park makes everything look a little bit better, so we understand that. But hopefully SABT can help us with something, an overarching plan that we can work on moving forward.
Great, thanks, Eric. Okay, let's see, where are we? Yeah,
That's right.
item 2. All right, moving to item 4, report of committee chair. I honestly don't have anything to say except welcome back to Public Works. I feel like we haven't had a meeting in forever, so thank you. Nancy?
No report.
Jeff?
No report?
All right, move on to city administrator report. Anything there?
Trying to have this thing come up.
Budget.
It is the budget. We are seeking feedback from the Board of Aldermen. We have been meeting with individual alderpersons to have them share with us their priorities. If by chance we haven't captured it, you know, and that it's reflected in the upcoming proposed budget. So we can have this discussion where you share those priorities you have with us at this meeting, or you can just communicate with me, or I can schedule individual meetings with you. I just wanted you to know that we have been working on the proposed budget, and when we have the next Ways and Means Committee meeting in September, we expect to really be jumping into it and talking about the capital budget. Also, I think primarily that, and then sharing with you what the timeline is going forward. So also at the next Ways and Means Committee, we will be having the Citizens Budget Forum where residents can come and share with us formally what they're interested in having the city pursue, or they can share it with you all at your ward meetings, and then you can convey it to us. There are a number of different ways to get that information to staff.
Okay, any comments or questions for Bola? Great. Everybody loves the budget process. Good times. All right, we're moving to department reports. We got Public Works. I think you have an item or two there, Dan. I guess this is the downside of canceling meetings because we kind of like get a backlog. We'll get back to normal.
Yeah, I've just got a whole list of little one-off items here. So the first one was about the sweeper. So in your packet, you'll see there's information on that. Rental, we called a few places. It's roughly $4,000 a week or over $10,000 a month. You know, a new sweeper, I put together a memo. So it just depends on what you want as far as the functionality. What we used to have, there's a picture in there. That was truck 72. That was a 2006 model. It was regenerative air, so it's got suction on the back and then a cab in the front with another motor. We've looked at one similar to that as well as mechanical broom. They don't have the suction part, it's just brooms and a conveyor system. But those are pretty similar in price. If you recall, we even looked at an EV model. That's like way out of our budget range. That's over 600,000, plus we'd have to put in special electric 480 volt to charge the thing. So we went back to just regular either diesel or something of that nature. So I kind of put together like a range in here and then like what the capacities were of the different sweepers. So where I'm leaning more towards would be either conventional, either used, or a demo model where it has some hours and miles on it. And it ranges anywhere from like 175 to 250,000. Usually holds around 3.5 cubic yards or greater. There is a nice size, like miniature one that's 150 to 160,000. That's that LS 175, and a 175 stands for 1.75 cubic yards. So it's smaller than a regular one as far as its capabilities. You know, there is an Italian one in there. You know, I looked at what they do, since they have way more, sweeping needs to the different plazas and areas of Europe. And they do actually have local representation, but they're about the same price as what some of the American ones are, like Pelican, that's made in Elgin, Illinois. Um, that one actually, that particular model is one of the biggest in capacity. So it's like 8 cubic yards, a little more than 8. It's actually in cubic meters, but when you do the conversion, it's a little over 8. So, and then there is actually one that's actually really cool. That's that Madvac B200. Its range is like 240 to 280,000, but it can be more than just a sweeper. So the accessories that you can put on it would be a salt spreader, a plow blade. You can do a spray system across the front and spray your streets. You can even take the whole thing off and put like a dump bed on there that tilts 3 different positions, either left, right, or back. So it could be used year round, which is, I thought, pretty cool. You could buy it as a sweeper initially and then add the accessories when you could afford them even. So this was more for information. We will be sweeping. It should be around that latter part of August, like probably the last part. We actually have key equipment. We'll be renting one for a week and we'll do all the wards. Then in about a month or two, when the leaves fall, then we'll do it again. We have budget to do that. And as you recall, we did actually sell the original one that we had on GovDeals. So most manufacturers say that they only last 10 or 12 years, and that thing was an '06, so it was pushed pretty far beyond its useful life. So I don't know if you have any questions on the sweeper.
Yeah, Nancy?
So I think this is a good report. Is this going to be in your budget proposal, or is this going to be in the?
It is in
we see
the
this at Ways and Means?
2024 budget. What we're trying to do is get a demo of either that one that can be converted or one of the more, we've already looked at, Schwartz was the manufacturer, but that's in the high 200s, and I really don't want to spend that, and I think it's overkill for our streets. I think you could probably even use a smaller one. You just wouldn't do the same number of streets in a week, but you really don't need to do them weekly. I would say if you did them every other month, and certain months, there's nothing to really pick up, like say February. It's like, well, we've already picked up the leaves, and maybe there's a little salt pocket here or there you could scoop up with it, but you don't really need to do it quite as frequently. I looked at other cities that actually don't do sweeping in-house, but farm it out, and they usually only do it 3 or 4 times a year.
Well, I do think that we have had our residents are accustomed to cleaner streets. So I'm
Yes.
hearing from residents that the streets don't look as nice. So this is definitely rising to the occasion. And the other thing is maybe when when the street sweeper is being rented these next 2 times in the fall, if we could put that out and you could say, well,
Yeah,
we'll
we
be
could-
in Ward 1 on Monday and Tuesday morning and Ward 2 on Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday, then we could, either the communications from the city or from
Yeah.
the all,
Art elsewhere,
Yeah.
so-
so that this, since it's a sort of a one-off and we could,
Yes, these small ones are actually cool because you get next to the curbs and you actually take on the trail systems that park.
Your mic is cutting out.
yeah, he's getting a new one.
Yeah, and the advantage of some of the smaller ones, they don't require a CDL. So I don't have a CDL, but I have a driver's license, so I could drive the thing. It's not, and it's smaller engine, so most of the parts in that, there's less parts to it, overall compared to the bigger ones, which have way more robust cleaning systems. So
And are they, well, as long as it's whatever you recommend, we'll
Yeah,
listen.
what
As
we'll
long-
do
As long
is,
as it picks up the stuff on the streets, we don't hear complaints.
and we could alert everybody when there is a demo, if it's on your street or whatever. I know we demoed them whenever they were in Webster Groves, the different distributors. They'll notify us and they'll usually hit a circuit of other cities.
Right.
So,
Well, thank you. Thank you for looking into this.
yep. Second item, the share the road signage. We do plan on
Hold on, I
putting
think
that.
Jeff has a question.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
just to give you some feedback, I mean, I think possibly it might be ward dependent, because I don't know that we get a whole lot of complaints about how pristine the streets are. I mean, we do have a few people that say, hey, there's seems to be some buildup of, especially when sweet gums and all that stuff, happens. So I think we do need a solution, but we can, I don't know, we're a fairly small, 2 square mile city. I think we could probably look at a solution that one is either smaller, and I like the idea that maybe it doesn't require special licensing or whatever. That's an interesting way to handle it, especially when we get into staffing needs and all of that. I'm really intrigued by the multifunctional one, so that, throughout the season, it can maybe dual purpose into some other things. And even if we get into a pretty heavy season of street cleaning, that doesn't mean we couldn't, rent to supplement for a week if lots of streets needed to be cleaned, So I just, those are the things I would encourage you to look at is what's the reality for what we really need for the size of our city and for all the other functions that we have. So,
Okay.
it's a good list, though.
So I'm the opposite as the engineer, so I believe in specific equipment usage, because you're going to wear it
Fair
out,
enough.
snow,
Yeah.
and, the multi-tool is not as good as a screwdriver. So, but have we thought about, sharing a resource with other municipalities at all? Is there, any options for that? I know that would be very complicated.
Yeah, we haven't really. I mean, I know that Richmond Heights has their own sweepers, Webster Groves. I know both of those cities have two sweepers, apiece, for each of those communities. So if one goes down, they'll bounce to the other one.
Yeah.
We only had this one, and it was pretty worn.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably sweeping too much. I mean,
Right, and that's why I thought, well, if you had a smaller one, for the cost of some of those smaller ones, you get two small ones versus one large one.
okay, well, all right. So I mean that's going to be in the budget. The 250 will be in the budget for next year, or the budget
Right.
proposal, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and that
Okay.
could get you pretty much anything on the list with the exception of like the electric. That's a budget buster.
Someday.
Yeah, I even contacted East West Gateway to see if there'd be like grant, like if, government money that I could bring that price down, and there really isn't, because they thought, well, you could use CMAQ, that, air mitigation grant, but it's not possible.
Well, thanks for looking into that.
Okay. The share of the road, we do plan on putting those up. Right now, what we're doing is the school markings. So we're over there like near Bremerton, Litzinger, I know Harrison. Tomorrow, we're going to be putting up the school stenciling. So we're doing that, all those markings. Then we also have some sidewalks to repair, continue the slabs and Hanley Industrial. That would be like just north of Strassner. And then MSD notified us at 7 Stratford that they do have a problem where it's a function of the lateral's connection to the pipe. It was never done properly however many years ago. So that's why there's a sinkhole there. So there is no problem with the lateral per se, so the homeowner doesn't have to fix it. MSD is going to come in next week, put in some sort of grout. I don't know if it's from the inside of the pipe. It almost sounded like it would be like a robot would seal it. And then once it's sealed, then we need to jump over there and then cut out the bad area of pavement, put in new asphalt. So we will get to those markings. And then the other thing that we were notified of, we've got the stop sign. It's a solar-powered stop sign that we plan to put up at Bremerton and Litzinger. So that was for higher visibility, so the word stop will light up and then the whole perimeter. It's a little bit, I guess, a better model than the one that's used at McKnight near York. So it's newer technology. It's supposed to be visible from like over a mile away. So, but we can adjust it.
That will light up during the day too, or just at night?
For low visibility, the word stop will light up, but under normal conditions, just the perimeter, you can either have it pulse or you can have it just stay on. I was just gonna have it pulse so it doesn't drain the batteries quickly. There's settings in there. We can change it however we need to.
And then I know when we first brought this up, we were gonna talk to Rock Hill.
Yes,
see
and they
what
plan
could
on
do.
changing theirs on
Okay.
the eastbound side to a bigger sign and then a advanced warning sign.
Good, perfect.
So we're trying to get that all done before school starts. And then while we're out there, we just happened to be in that Harrison area, doing the markings. We tested out their push button crosswalk there on High School just south of Harrison, and one side doesn't work. It only lights up if you're standing on the east side and press it. It only lights up on the east and doesn't communicate with the other one. So we notified the school, and they're supposed to reach out to their contractor to get it fixed before school starts.
So I have two crossing things that just to put on your list somewhere, saves me an email, on McKnight Road, it's the crosswalk at Sonora, the Brentwood white markings, the white markings on the Brentwood side are fading. So
The rectangles that go across
the
the road?
rectangles, the white rectangles that go
Yeah,
across.
okay.
Ladoos are newer because I guess they repainted them when they paved. But I just noticed that they're getting pretty worn. It doesn't need to be done anytime like right away, but
yeah.
it is definitely getting worn. And then the crosswalk, when you go across Manchester at Carl's, over right around Carl's, there's the new crosswalk to go from
Oh, yeah, yeah, the push button, yeah.
the push button. So if you're driving east on Manchester, there's a tree that comes over and it sort
Right.
of blocks the light. And
Does,
so
yeah.
before the kids go to school, if we could, I don't know who's responsible for trimming that tree, but it just doesn't seem safe if people are going to be using that more and more frequently, that the cars driving
Eastbound, yeah.
should be able to see the flashing sign.
Yeah, we notified MoDOT because it's on the east side of the side street, which I guess that's what, Manderley? There's like a chiropractic business, and it
Right,
not only does it block the sign, but I noticed that it blocked the street light. So the new decorative light is kind of sandwiched in between the tree limbs, and I was like, well, if you cut that back, it'll light up the sidewalk better and the sign.
Okay.
So they've been made aware for a couple meetings to go take a look at it and fix it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. The replacement request at street signs on Dorothy, that 30-mile-per-hour sign is being removed as soon as the 20 is available. MoDOT Sign Shop is making a new one. They weren't aware that they had made a mistake, but we notified them a few weeks ago, so that'll be swapped out. Because they said, well, if you can't take care of it, we've got 20s, we'll swap it out, but it doesn't have the black backing like the other one does, so. And where else are we? Oh, the update on the stormwater plan, that's the big one. So we've talked about that with MoDOT for Ruth Avenue, and they said that they've done as much grading and slope change as they could going north of there, and that they believe that the issue is more with the parking lots and the runoff coming and kind of going around those inlets. So they're gonna just kind of watch and see what happens during the next rain event, but they didn't have a plan to do anything else with those inlets. They're not gonna raise them, lower them, shift them. They said it's more with the topography that goes towards the inlets.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was getting across as well. I think, whether it's the parking lots or Ruth itself, from the north coming down, there seems to be still a lower elevation that will pool and pond water up, which becomes a safety hazard. Not only just it could cause backup with flooding, but with cars coming down and having to go through a couple inches of water, or turning off of Manchester and then hitting a couple inches of water. It's just something that I think we need to definitely keep an eye on. And the good thing is that it's easy to see what happens when it's raining. So we just need to have somebody there when it does.
Yeah, and one of the solutions we thought of in-house would be, that we could do ourselves, would be either put like the asphalt berm like we did along Mary to kind of divert the water towards where we want it to go, or we've got the concrete and asphalt planer and we would just groove the east side so that it kind of creates like a little bit of a swale and it pushes the water where we want it. So there's little tweaks that we might be able to do for very little cost that might improve that. But we'll have to wait and see what happens.
And I think we passed up on the previous bullet, the safety signage and markings for the new GRG trail at Van Mark Way and the Florence intersections.
Yeah, I think Parks was covering that later in the report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yep. So then going down to 5, the status of the stormwater master plan. Within your packet, I put the proposal that Gonzalez had for doing those 6 different projects. So, it's just under $36,000 is the proposal. I planned on bringing that to the board in the upcoming board meeting, since I know it's the committee's desire to get going on those projects. I did speak with MSD, so regarding our OMCI funding, in 2021, we had like $125,219, and then in 2022 and 23, they set aside $127,251. So what that means is there's roughly 379,721 that's sitting in OMCI funds. We can get our money back from the Gonzalez master plan. That was roughly $164,000. So we had already put in for that project. It was approved. Now we can get the reimbursement to pay ourselves back. And then that would still leave a little over 215, almost $216,000. And of that, I can actually use the roughly 216 to cover the design fees. And then the construction of those 6 projects was around 180,000. So I should have enough to budget, get those projects done. Then after that, you don't have any more money, but then they'll set aside money for 2024 and then essentially 2025, because there's only 5 years that OMCI is supposed to go through a cycle. And then after that, I don't know that there's any more OMCI money. You know, not like it's now.
Well, I wasn't aware that OMCI was only a 5-year thing. I thought it was forever.
Because of the discussion that's going on regarding the rate commission, there is a possibility, I heard today, that they will come before each of the cities and ask if we want to continue to have them collected or whether we want to turn it off. Because part of this rate commission that they're proposing will include funding to address stormwater issues throughout the region. So that's for sometime next year, depending on the outcome after the voters vote on that.
I think we should move out. I mean, this plan's been sitting on a shelf for a year now, and we have the money. I mean, OMCI, blood money should be used for this, so.
So that is the plan, to go forward and have the design done this year, and then next year. Now, if they were to do it quickly, and there's still enough time this year to go ahead and issue an RFP for it, we will definitely pursue that. But we're going to go ahead and budget for it also next year, just in case, you know, so we have both options to pursue.
Would it be budgeted with OMCI funds? We wouldn't be using
Yes.
any general fund?
No, all OMCI.
I'd like to make a motion that we send forward to the Board of Aldermen the Gonzalez proposal for design stormwater bid package 1 for a total of $35,835.
Second? All right. Comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. All right. Motion, movement, yeah.
Okay. The next item is a request for a speed cushion in Hanley Industrial, like near 645 Hanley Industrial. It's kind of a one-off because if you read the traffic calming program, it's for residential. So a resident would petition for one on, you know, pick a street, you know, Lewis, Cecilia, whatever the street is. It's within that one block that they need to get 2/3 of the signatures. This is down across from the basketball court and that in Hanley Park. So it doesn't really follow the rules of the traffic calming. What I could do, if you so desire, I could put the data collector up just to see what the conditions are, you know, how much volume, what are the speeds. At the very least, we could bring it to public safety and have the police look at it, see if there's a problem. You know, sometimes people think there's speed, and without having a radar gun, you don't know, and the device does.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little kind of surprised to see this on our agenda. I think that it's definitely something that I'd like the Public Safety Committee to take up. But I generally do agree that we should, even though we don't have a mechanism in place in our toolkit for commercial areas like this, we should probably follow best practices.
Yes.
Yeah, I've already got the collector up on White Avenue, so I can pop this one up and calibrate it, and, you know, it doesn't take but a few minutes to set it up.
So did this request come from some of the
There's
businesses?
a property owner that notified the city
Yes.
administrator.
Okay,
Right.
business owners that were there
Right.
felt like, okay,
Right.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second time. I think we need a traffic calming process for commercial, right? We had the
Right.
Hoffman Brothers crosswalk someday and this, and there just
Yep.
isn't a, you know, the residential one is great because here's the process, here's what you do, so.
And then the next item, the sealants, like we've done in the past, like Madge, Hatton, several other streets we've used the sealants on. Sonora, I believe, was one. There's 7 streets that we were planning, actually, there were 8, but high school, we decided not to because high school's already got utility work and other stuff. We'd like to not put sealant down because it would be damaged right away. So of the 7 streets that we did price up, it's $100,114. So it's within budget. What we'll be doing is bringing a resolution with the contract to the board so that everybody can vote on it. But those streets were originally milled and overlaid around 2014, 2015. So you'll see the list in there. It's woodsy, it's urban, Spanish, like several streets that are in that pocket. So they really haven't had any damage done to them, and this would preserve them. It would extend the life, 5 or 7 years. So that was the goal of that one. And then the MSD Commission, switching gears, I know Bola's already talked about that. I don't know if there's any questions.
Hey, Dan, going back just a little, is that max sealant that
It
we
is,
always
it's
use?
the modified aggregate quickset, so it's like 3/8 of an inch of sealant and specialized proprietary rock that they put down. They're actually doing work in other cities, so like they'll be in Webster Groves, Ladue, they'll be doing those, so we get a pretty good price break when they're in town, and they can knock it out sometime, he said probably in late August.
And the streets, we've been using that for, I think, 4 years now or so, and
Yes.
it's working as.
It's
advertised.
working well. It
Yeah.
hasn't like delaminated, peeled up or anything. It just, it stays down. It looks just like brand new asphalt, but it's just a veneer and, it
Great.
seems to be holding well. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Any other questions for Dan? Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Hey, Eric, go ahead.
Sure, I just want to make sure. I will say this is like the largest department report I've ever had, so I apologize, and I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. No rhyme or reason, except for I went alphabetically. So the Brentwood Ice Rink PTO, the board's been improving them to have free facility usage at the Brentwood Ice Rink for the past couple years. They contacted us this year. They'd like to do 2 separate events. It's grown so large that they're basically turning people away. So they like to do one for K through 2nd, another 3 through 5. We've tentatively booked those pending the approval of the Public Works Committee and the Board of Aldermen. So if you guys are okay with this, they'll bring it to the next board meeting.
I think this is a good idea. I think the more we give the kids the opportunity to be exposed to this facility, then they come back and skate and pay for it and all that, so.
Hey, maybe that was a motion, but I have a question. So sorry, I'm pulling up your thing here, but are we gonna stop doing this every year? I thought there was a plan that we were gonna do an ordinance to.
That was the next part, is that we're requesting approval to authority to approve future requests with approval of the city administrator. I'm not sure if that needs to go to the board. We're happy to bring something to the Board of Aldermen in the future, but we've been doing it this way because that's how we started it with the PTO. We're happy to do it. We're obviously want to be good partners with the school district. They help us out with a lot of things as well, especially marketing. So, we see it as a beneficial partnership anyway, so.
So is it, you're asking for this specific request or for all future that we
All
could?
future,
Okay.
and including this, I guess.
This one, I guess if it looks here that they're looking for an approval from the Public Works Committee and the Board of Aldermen. So I'll make that motion that we approve this to forward on to the Board of Aldermen. And then, explore the opportunity for providing authority for the city administrator, whatever administratively that we need to develop for that.
Second.
So with that, there's also a request with Mark Twain being down to allow them to use the park. This is a one-time, not come back every year, and that's for April 27th for their field day party. Can we roll that into this?
Brentwood Park?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
We emailed it about a little bit. We were going to roll it into this ordinance. So there's a request to do that as well. And again, that is not a every year. That is a one time, because on field day they need room, food and stuff, and they can't do it at Mark Twain 2024. So there's an additional request, so.
And I
wonder
think
if
does- McGrath does theirs at the high school, right?
I think so.
Or at least they did, I believe. I mean, I think, yeah, until the school facilities are built and the fields are back accessible, I think allowing them to use city facilities is a good idea. So, yeah, I'll amend my motion to include allowing the both elementary schools, if they wish to have their field day in the Brentwood Park. Great.
Yeah, I'll second, but then I have a question. Like,
What about Mount Calvary or something? No.
yeah, I mean, there are other parks, and I guess you need a restroom.
True.
And I'm sort of torn with what I'm going to say because it doesn't make sense with the ice rink, but there's different costs with Brentwood Park. You have to have somebody there. There's the nano or whatever they're called, the sliding doors. It's a different level of staff that I guess we always have we would typically have the ice rink staffed, but there's additional cost of having staff at Brentwood Park. So I don't know if this should be at cost or.
I'll double check. I believe
Or-
we discussed this at a,
I thought we discussed this and they paid for staff. I don't remember.
yeah, I think it was, they covered the cost of staff for that day. I'll double check everything and I'll include that in my memo for the board meeting.
Yeah.
Because I definitely want to be supportive, but I also,
It's good for the board.
that's a different kind of building, I think, than the rest of our parks. And so I just, we charge so much more to the public to rent that. And so I just want to make sure that we're being reasonable with the expenses that it brings to the city.
Yeah, and I, kind of along the lines, I would not be in favor of allowing them to use Brentwood Park for free, ongoing every year. This is, I think, just during the construction event, 1 year only, that they don't have a place and they want it to be walkable from that side, so it's a one-off, but I agree on some of the costs.
I think, now that I'm trying to remember things correctly, and I'll double check, I believe what we discussed a couple months ago was a PTO fundraising event at Brentwood Park, and that we approved for half price, I believe. This obviously is something different. This is a school district function for the kids. This has not been brought to my attention.
But, I mean, I guess
Happy
the
to do
question
it.
is it does, just giving them the ability to have it in Brentwood Park does not necessarily mean that they have the pavilion. I mean, the bathroom can be open, right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
they don't necessarily need the pavilion, but maybe the event lawn and other areas. So I think we need to just, I guess, get more clarity on what the ask is. The motion that I would say is that we're open to working with them depending on what their needs are. And so if we can have that information by the time it gets to the Board of Aldermen, that would be good.
That's in your motion. I think that's.
That's in my motion. You got that, Kelly?
I'm going to have to re-listen to this.
Okay, all right. And we can talk about it more at the board as well. When we have that detail. Okay, any other comments, questions? All in favor, say
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Great.
The Brentwood Park sign was installed today. It came in, we did have to get permission from Stoughton Company Architects since it was private property. Kelly was nice enough to reach out to them. They were nice enough to agree to put the sign on the corner. So it is on the south side of Pendleton. It's easier to see if you're coming from Brentwood than if you're coming from Webster Groves, technically. So that is installed and ready to go. Crushed granite in the dog park, something brought up by my staff is that they are recommending adding crushed granite throughout the entire dog park. Maintaining the grass becomes increasingly more difficult, and it would provide a consistent surface for everyone to use the dog park. I go back and forth because some people really like it, and then some people dislike it. So again, this is something that I talked to my staff, I'd bring and have the discussion.
I haven't had a chance to talk to anybody in the 2 days because for some reason I'm missing all the dogs down there, but I would want to get feedback. I know a lot of people like, even though it's not grassy, it's dirt, but it's cooler and there are trees over there. So I get the sense sometimes that people like having the different surfaces, and yeah, we all know the grass stinks over there, but that's just the way it is.
And there's no rush on this, so we can table this for a month or two.
I would say the crushed granite where it is dusty, but it is working so great. Like, we get no mud or anything. I mean, like, just thinking about what that was before is just like, it seems like a million years ago. Rains, and there might be a puddle on top of it, but it's not muddy, and the dogs are fine. You can go, you don't even care anymore. So I like the crushed granite.
FEMA. I was asked to provide a FEMA update, and I provided a fairly lengthy one, and I won't go through all of it, but the basics of Category A, which is citywide debris removal, FEMA did approve the request, and we have been reimbursed the $48,000 already. Category B, which is the protective measures, that was the overtime for police and fire, was also approved, and we received the money there. Leland Terrell, we had a long conversation today. I have weekly meetings with FEMA still, so it's a great part of my week. And so there, as you see, we already know the cost of the first 3 sections, which was close to $600,000 by the time it was all end and done. And the rough order of magnitude, because of the sheer drop off of the last section, which is by the dog park, is about $900,000. So we're looking at $1.4 million. And they thought the first 3 was under $15,000. So it's a little bit difference. We've been working with them. We've been talking to them about everything that we needed to do, because our argument is it's not what we wanted to do. I don't have to write a check for $500,000 to replace a small section of trail. It was the Corps of Engineers, it's MSD, it was the floodplain. And so we've been getting them all that information. I will say that Christy Brinkman with Castle has been on some of these phone calls with me, because she is better versed to have those conversations with FEMA, which has been very helpful. And so hopefully we have it down to the part where they're ready to submit it, in which case it then goes for FEMA approval. So we're getting real close on that one.
Is Castle doing that just out of the goodness of their heart, or are we paying them for that?
They're doing that out of the goodness of their heart.
Surprised.
And then, okay, so water control, that is the Brentwood bound expenditures. I think we've mentioned this before. FEMA denied this request. I could go on for about an hour about why they denied it and why I think it's incorrect. And obviously we appealed that as well. We did work with Hush Blackwell. I think they mentioned that in one of their closed sessions. And I think we have a pretty strong case of why this should not be appealed, or should be approved. So we submitted that before I left on my vacation, middle of July. And so we should hear back something in the next 90 days. It's a SEMA appeal. So they're the ones who will review it, and then we'll have a second chance to appeal if they deny it again. We're hopeful that they'll see things our way, especially with our response. Buildings and equipment, for the most part, most of those are pretty good. Fire department and electronic speed sign, we have already been reimbursed for those. 2018 Breckenridge, that's another tough one. We were talking about that one again today, and I think we finally got that one wrapped up. It comes down to the fact that what FEMA will pay you for, and what they pay you for, is to return everything to the condition it was before the flood. In a situation like this, the building's been substantially damaged. Webster says we can either demolish it, floodproof it, or bring it, elevate it up outside the floodplain. None of those options are feasible for the city. So what the option that we've come up with was to do an alternate project. And you do multiple alternate projects if you want. It's basically saying that this project is not in the best benefit of the city to repair this, and here are some other things that we can do. And that is the way to get the most amount of money for the damages that were done. So there are $331,000 of damage done to that building based on the FEMA estimator calculator, which was done by Webster Groves. And so if we just demolished it, we'd only get close to $100,000. And obviously we don't want to do that. So we did the alternate project. We've supplied, or we asked for them to do the demolition as one of them. And the second is to replace the roof at City Hall. This has been a ongoing capital need. It's been in the budget the last few years, and it's a way to kind of transfer some of those dollars to a project that's needed within the city, and might hopefully then also free up some capital money for other projects here in the near future. So that has been submitted. That got submitted today, so we'll hear more about that in the next couple weeks. Parks and Recreation was the largest category, 20 items in 6 different parks. You'll see the cost there. We did kind of submit that, and we did have that. We had some questions. We've answered those, so it's now in FEMA's court. So these last couple projects that we've been submitted now, it goes to FEMA's cost estimators, and then they either obligate the funds, which then come from SEMA. And once we get those, then they can either reimburse us or we can use them for the projects we haven't done yet. There's still a few projects that are still kind of on the table. One has been that last section of Lee Wind Trail. I'm not going to do a project for $900,000 without FEMA knowing exactly how much money FEMA is going to give us. And so we're waiting for that. The difficult part after that is then that's 75%. The last 10% from SEMA, they do in one big check at the end. So we have to get through all of this process first, obligate the funds, show that we spent the funds properly, and then they'll cut us a check. So, I mean, currently right now, we've received $63,000. We've requested $4.2 million. So we're a little bit below what we've requested, but we're working on this. And like I said, I have a weekly meeting with our project manager. We think our meeting next week may be our last meeting. I might be drinking at work. We might be having some celebration drinks over Zoom. Of course, we'd never do that, but that's how I would feel to be done with them. And then honestly, it goes to SEMA, and I've had a lot of conversations with SEMA. They've been very easy to work with. So we're getting close, although I still feel like we're really far away with some of the things we still need to get done. But it is an ongoing project that is something that I will not let drop off. Questions about that? If you've been at Gateway Fountain, you've noticed maybe the water's been dropping. We lost about 2/3 of the water in the Gateway Fountain over a span of 5 days. This was while I was gone, so that's always fun to get an email on vacation about that. So we did contact the pump shop. They came out. They're like, hey, we think it's probably a drain that's open. So no, it wasn't the drain. They come out. They were out earlier this week, and they believe there may be a gap or a tear in the liner. So that is an interesting thing. We were going to have to formulate a plan of what the next steps are to confirm that. And if those are the issues, how do we correct that? I don't have those answers at this time, but we are working with them quickly to try to hopefully determine some of the stuff. So Hanley Park benches, we did start working on the benches this week. We removed all the areas around the one concrete pad. We're going to expand the concrete pad to a bench in there. And then we're going to move the trash can to another location. We have the benches on site, and actually in their garage here. So we do have them ready to go. So as soon as we can get the concrete pads poured, we'll get those installed and they'll be ready to go. Do apologize. That did take up some time, but staff has been delayed due to the multiple storm collections and even we've been doing debris removal down at the park. So we've been cleaning up a lot of stuff lately. Lee Wind Trail, we've been asked about reestablishing those sections of trail. So the park superintendent, myself, the arborist, and the horticulturalist all went out there. The sections that have been removed and replaced with rock, there's not much we can do about reestablishing those unless we put multiple feet of or soil on top of that and then try to reestablish it. That's going to be costly. And so I think the question comes down to, do we want a physical barrier? If so, we're probably looking at some sort of fence to keep people from going down. The first section closest to Oak Tree Park, there looks like there's a shelf that I think Castle had to install to put their equipment on so they didn't get into the creek. So we might be able to reestablish some trees there. We're looking into that one specifically. And that might be able to help out the first section, but the other couple sections we'll need to talk about.
We don't have fences along other sections of that trail that are also, sharp drop-offs.
Now, if you think about Oak Tree Park, as you continue in Oak Tree Park, there's no benches there. The only place we have around any sort of creek area is Memorial Park, and that is because it is a straight drop down into, that's Black Creek there. So that's the only place around our park system that we have fences.
I guess my question is, do we need something there?
I think it depends if it makes people a little bit more comfortable. Ultimately, if you look at trails throughout Missouri, they're there's drops off of trails. It depends on the city's feeling about liability. I don't think, personally, I don't think we need them.
I don't, I mean, it's not a sharp drop off. I mean, it's sharp rocks, of course, but, it's not like you're gonna take a misstep and, go wily coyoting down this thing. So, it just seems like a kind of a hassle for no reason, honestly. Does
It's something we can review a little bit more with SWT during the master plan process as well.
Yeah,
So we can
I've
have
heard
that conversation.
nobody say that they're concerned about. I mean, they've said they want vegetation back, and I've explained, where you're gonna put it, but, I haven't heard any safety concerns from anybody.
I haven't either. And there aren't, I know in some areas of Maplewood along Deer Creek, where they have the same kind of rock, seems like the same rock kind of levees or whatever you call them, not levees, just reinforced banks. It seems like you see them trying to plant some trees along there. Is that just a different, is there anything that can be grown in the sort of rocks?
Weeds will find a way. I mean,
Yeah.
weeds will find a way. There will be green.
Yeah, we don't want weeds.
There will be green in there at some point. And we'll have to go out and spray them. But to get actually any sort of real vegetation that you want,
You have to have soil,
Yeah.
pretty good. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree that, I don't know that we need to be putting up barrier fences and things like that. That seems excessive. Part of it's just, having people become comfortable now with the way the creek looks and how it works,
Yeah, I'll just add that I don't think we should be trying to put something on top of this fence that we're trying to use to keep the bank secure. And change is hard. It was prettier with all the greenery, but it's safer now, so.
All right, probably the longest one, the low-speed vehicle signage. So I did put this in board docs, and I don't know if you had a chance to really look at it too long. What I did was take a look at the park system, and I just kind of Google mapped it and put it on the document for you. And every red X that you see is a access to a trail into the Brentwood Park system. There are 42 of them currently, and that's if I didn't miss any. And you think of ones like Rogers Parkway, where every street there's there's an entrance onto the trail. So obviously we are not, signage is not the best thing. You don't want to put too much signage up that you then ruin the beauty of the park system. But I understand that there's going to be some trails or some accesses that are important. And so what we did as a staff is go through and said, where do we think the ones are most important? And so that's what the numbers are next to the red X. So if there's a number next to the red X, that's one we think, yeah, we should have a sign. What we'll try to do is look to see what other signage we have in the parks, especially if you think about Memorial Park, Hanley Park. There are some that already have signs like this area being monitored by the Brentwood Police Department. Maybe we can double up on the signage there. We'll definitely we'll update our park rules when we talk about move that in the near future, and we'll add that to the rules that low-speed vehicles aren't allowed on the park trails. And so we can do those type of things. While we try to reduce it, we still have 20 locations that we feel are probably critical to make sure to kind of access it. We'd be working with Dan on the signage to get the signs ordered. Something that we talked about in previous meetings, where we'd probably do something with a glyph, and then as well as wording, and then add the ordinance number underneath it, just in case there's questions about why they can't do it. But that's where we're at right now. The other option is doing, sorry, Alderman, other option is doing markings on the trail, and, but those just aren't as visible, typically.
So if we hadn't passed the ordinance that allows 3 sections of trail to have low-speed vehicles, then they just wouldn't be allowed anywhere, and we wouldn't have to put signs anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, nobody reads signs
I
for
was going to say,
anything.
I mean, it doesn't matter how many signs we're going to put up, people will still likely,
I will tell you, there's a golf cart that goes through Brentwood Park 2 or 3 times a week, somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. One of the things we like to do is watch the video of Brentwood Park to see how things are going. And seeing the golf cart come through is one of the fun things. The police department has been notified, they know, but again, they're not usually typically out between midnight and 2 on our parks that are typically closed. So, I mean, I think ultimately, no matter what signage you have, it's going to be an enforcement issue.
Right.
And that's what we're going to need to do with our park staff and then as well as the help of the police department.
I mean, my thought when we first started the ordinance that allowed it on the 3 small sections of trail was more for the walkers to make them aware that low-speed vehicles are allowed on this section. I almost see it as the inverse of this. Let's not tell the low-speed vehicles where they're not allowed. Let's tell people where they are allowed, and they would just be those 3 small sections.
We could easily do that.
And it wouldn't be, it doesn't have to be big signs. I mean, it can be really small. That's what I like about GRG. They have these really small signs. It doesn't have to be MUTCD compliant because it's not a highway. I'm sure it's a red one that goes through at like midnight. So, but the vast majority of the low-speed vehicle owners are very cognizant of where they're not supposed to go because they know if it's a problem, then we're going to repeal it. So, I would be in favor of a much reduced. Let's just maybe flip it and say, low-speed vehicles are allowed here, small signs, very small signs, and just so people know where they are allowed and they're not allowed anywhere else and everybody knows that's the ordinance.
Happy to do that.
I just feel like, even 20 signs is a lot. Yeah. But I do have questions about the white path, if this is the appropriate time, the little section that they are allowed on.
Yes.
Because we have a combination of problems there where people are still using it for cars, and then we had the bollards put up, and then people were taking down the bollards and still using it with cars, and then we put up a sign that said no motorized vehicles, and then people are assuming that means no low-speed vehicles are allowed there as well. So I think we need to clarify something there, or I don't know.
I think that would be a good location or good place to add the be aware of low-speed vehicle usage, that type of signage there. Ultimately, I think part of the issue is the bollards were just put straight into the asphalt, so it was easy to break off. We've reinforced them in concrete.
Right.
Unless they go over them, I don't see a vehicle removing those anymore. So I think hopefully we'll see no more usage of vehicles on that path. So I think low-speed vehicles can still get around. And if we go the sign that you spoke about earlier, I think that would be a good compromise.
Yeah, I mean, then, should we take out the no motorized vehicle sign that's there now if we think the bollards are going to be sufficient to stop that?
Sure.
And I will say, can we get a small amount of gravel on the right-hand side as you're going up the hill? Because, the tires can almost get around that bollard, but it's tight. Because it's a hard challenge, because a low-speed vehicle is only a little bit narrower than a car. And so we've got to kind of thread that needle.
Staff can look at that.
Literally.
Yeah, staff can definitely look at that.
So is everybody okay with that? Not do the 20 signs, but just smaller?
Yeah, do you need a motion from this committee, not just opinion of the chair?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Typically,
I'll
we-
make the
we can't-
motion
yeah.
to research the signs as we discussed, to only be where the low-speed vehicles are allowed and not where they're prohibited.
Sounds good.
Second.
Great. Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
So next is the Manchester Road Tunnel, which is, the quick update is we did meet with TWM and Planning Design Studio who did the design. They did, it is their opinion that the contractor did not complete the project per the design and sent an official finding report to MoDOT. MoDOT is currently reviewing that with KCI, and that we told that we should have the response this week. Once I hear things like that, maybe it's a little shell shock from other things that we're dealing with. I'm feeling like this might be a little bit of a battle, but I think we'll be working with TWM and PDS to make sure that everything's working the way we want it to be working. And then naming the road on Brentwood Park. So I know we brought this a couple months ago. The good news is, in talking to St. Louis County, the process is a little bit easier than we first thought. Thankfully, the process we were looking at was for more of unincorporated St. Louis County. It's a little bit easier in incorporated St. Louis County. So what we really need to do is put together a dedication plat. And once we get the dedication plat, we can put it in St. Louis County. Once it's in St. Louis County, St. Louis County will then add it to all their street signs and things like that. So we are working with Metron right now to get the dedication plat done. I think they're close. If not, we might have seen, or it's very close to be done, and then we just need to move forward and getting that recorded with St. Louis County. So,
Do you need anything from us on that?
not right now.
I noticed Google Maps has already updated the roads.
They have, which is nice.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Eric? Thanks, that's a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to planning and development. Hey, Winnie.
So I mentioned earlier that we have been working with IBTS to get us up to speed. And he is working on some of the backlog of the electrical permits. He has completed 37, and he has 37 in review. He will be finishing up a large project in Olivet soon, so he'll be able to take on more of those. And he has taken on some of the inspections for the destination playground first thing in the morning. So that's where we are in that.
So with IBTS, so my understanding when we approved that was they have more capacity, but it's just one person that we're really getting?
They can call someone in for, like, if we need floodplain, they have someone they can call in to do that. But right now, he is focusing on the permit review, so we can certainly look at calling in others.
Okay, and then we're paying per review, right? That's the way it was?
It's per review or per hour. Some of the small ones, he's like, I'm not gonna nickel and dime y'all, but, so we're just trying to get up to speed, yeah.
And then how will we see the costs? Those will come across in the warrant list then? Okay. Are you planning to budget something for that next year to continue it on?
Yes. Add that to our budget under miscellaneous contractual.
Okay.
So speaking of, so we are still recruiting for the vacant positions. We have it listed at the International Code Council nationwide. In the Missouri chapter, Mayboy, Missouri Building Official, like that, and MACE, the Missouri Association of Code Enforcement. And there was one more. What was it? Oh, yeah, the East-West Gateway had it on there. So we are still reviewing, and we've had a few interests, so we are still pursuing some of those as well. Last night was the Planning and Zoning Commission, so the Stormwater Amendment passed that. So that will be on the August 21st Board of Aldermen meeting. We also had the second part of the parking text amendment that we're looking at, and that also passed. So that would be on the September 5th Board of Aldermen meeting. So we also had, and this is also further down below, we issued the RFQ for the architectural design guidelines back in May. The top candidate is H3 Studio. They initially came in a little high, so they reworked their budget and the concept just to focus on like the town center or the Manchester corridor. Their initial proposal thought about 10 different places, and I'm like, no, we don't need that kind of scale. So they brought it down to 84,000. A couple of options that we can include after the fact would be up to 12,000. So the Planning and Zoning Commission made their recommendation to move that to the Board of Aldermen as well. And that is item C under the agenda. So we would like your approval to move forward with them as well. So.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll talk that a little bit more when we get to item C.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff?
Question about, might as well ask it now, I guess. The stormwater amendment, because that's not in our business, right? That's just going to go to the board?
Right, you first reviewed it and then made
Yeah,
the
right.
recommendation. It was the zoning sections that the Planning and Zoning Commission has to
That's right.
review.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I watched the planning and zoning meeting. The one question that I have is, so the increase from 200 to 500, is that right?
That didn't pass. Yeah, there was an open question, is 200 square feet too small? Do we want to just have it at 500 square feet of new additional coverage? The Planning and Zoning Commission did not seem to want to adjust that. So
Okay.
if that is something that the board wants to consider, that would be part of the discussion on the 21st.
Okay, all right. And they didn't take that up, was that, they didn't feel it was necessary to change it, or there just wasn't anybody who sort of spoke up for or against it?
Right. I think there was the feeling that there wasn't any need to change the current one. Currently, it's 200 square feet.
Okay,
The permit fees are based if you're under 500 square feet, there's a $500 inspection,
Okay.
the permit fee. If you're over 500 square feet, it's 1,000. So the question is if we just have it at 500 square feet, we would eliminate the 500 permit fee for that. Or, yeah, they didn't seem interested in wishing to change that at all.
okay. Well, we can take that up, I guess, at the board level. That's something we need to do here in this committee.
And we are working a lot of overtime to help keep on track with everything, so I would like to, while they're here, I would like to commend my staff. But if you have any questions for us or anything, they are also here to answer any questions.
I'll just thank them for sitting through this really long meeting after they're working on this overtime, trying to catch up, so it's really.
It's painful. we
it-
know.
Questions?
Okay, thanks, Whitney. All right, and then SUSCOM, I don't think there's really anything, I'll just read this, but we're expecting some new appointments to come before the big board. They've been kind of low for the summer with the passing of the sustainability plan, so I'm sure we'll pick right back up with no mo April soon. All right, moving to the consent agenda, all we have is meeting minutes.
Second?
Comments, questions, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. Going to old business. Naming of the road. Yep, okay. I will say again, it's not often that we get to name a new road, so this is big time. New business, 9A we moved. Go to 9B, shared use equipment agreement with neighboring municipalities.
This is a new item, and we've shared equipment and kind of backed each other up in the past. So like, for example, during the floods last year in July, Webster Groves came and helped sweep Russell Avenue and do some cleanup. So I know the city attorney had worked with some of these other communities. If you look at the list, it's several of our comparators, so De Pere, Ellisville, Baldwin, Clayton. This would document the shared use. So if they have a message board or a chainsaw or the reciprocal of that, we can always reciprocate and give them, our items too in case they have an emergency. So what we're trying to do is document this, with the approval of this committee, take it to the board, and we'll put together a bill and actually document this. And then it goes to the cities that are already participating, and then they just approve it or reject it, which I don't know why they would not approve us to join the group.
Why do we need this? I mean, if it's already happening, and I think it's
Just
a great
because
thing.
it documents like the hold harmless and, it's like if, how you return it in the condition that it's supposed to be in and who's responsible for repairs. So right now we just have like a handshake agreement, and this would actually put the terms together for each city or for us to join that group. I mean, we've never damaged anybody's things that we
Right.
borrowed. We borrowed message boards from Clayton for Brentwood days, and, you know, we could continue to do that, but this would help document that.
Do we need something like this for like the fire department as well?
Yes, this would include that. And, you know, we've had an example here recently. It wasn't us. It was another city that borrowed another fire department's equipment only to get it involved in an accident. And then all of a sudden, who pays the deductible for the repair? And it was a significant amount. So there was all kinds of mess around that. So now this would help us. In addition to, we now have additional training, so we know that when we borrow somebody else's equipment, we have to quickly notify our insurance carrier that we have in our possession someone else's property.
As I always am, I think this is a great thing when we share with other communities. So I would make a motion that we approve this mutual aid agreement and send it to the full board.
Second. Great. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Go on to 9C, the RFQ for design guidelines. So Wendy, you're back up.
So as I mentioned, the top candidate for the RFQ was H3 Studio. It was reviewed by myself and Matt Foreman and Carl Carlin, who are both members of the Architectural Review Board and Planning and Zoning Commission. Their proposal would be a year-long process, so we had initially budgeted $100,000 in this year, so we would increase that budget for it to be carried over to next year as well. It's a year process and lots of public engagement, so they had a really robust and similar detailed presentation and proposal, so I felt they were the top candidate.
Okay. Any questions?
Motion to approve the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission for H3 Studios to forward on to the Board of Aldermen.
Second.
All right. Any comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thanks, Woody.
All right, I'm wrapping up with two things. I'll try and make them fairly quick. So the first is our annual fees and charges recommendations. This is always approved by the Public Works Committee, then modeled in the budget, which then gets approved during the budget process during the Board of Aldermen. When we look at fees, we do a comparison of all of our fees to our competitors, primarily in the Parks and Recreation field. Depending on the speciality of a facility, like the ice rink, we'll look at Centene and Maryville and those type of things as well. But typically we look at our comparators. And so really the increases are a few main reasons. The cost of doing business, obviously, we all know has increased a lot the last few years. And so our profit margins have decreased a lot. And we just feel that those need to be increased. The other thing is part-time staffing costs continue to increase. We had to increase our part-time staffing costs the last 2 years ago, I believe, try to keep up with the market. This is something that every department is having issues with. We've discussed this at multiple department or director meetings throughout the county, and everyone's struggling to find staff. Pools are closing, ice rinks are closing or different times because they can't find staff, and how do you remain competitive? And the last is that we are comparable. There are things that we like to be low at. We like to be one of the lower meeting room rental rates because we do a decent meeting room business. We do $120,000 a year in meeting room rentals at the rec center. We do that because we're lower than other people, and we like to stay that way. Ice rink, we like to be in the middle. We're never going to raise our fees to Maryville or Centene. We don't want to. We want to be lower so that the people who want to save money will come out to our facility instead of going to the brand new facility. We can't compete with them. We don't have a bar. We don't have a sugar fire in that facility, so we have to compete with prices. So those are things that we kind of look at. And we feel we are very, very comparable to where we want to be, even with these increases. So the quick rundown is meeting rooms, just a little bit of increase with our resident, non-resident rate in meeting rooms. The ice rink increasing it another $10 for our prime and non-prime rates. And then some small increases to our outdoor sand volleyball courts and baseball and or sports fields.
Hey, Eric, the only one that kind of sticks out is room B half. So resident went up $10 and non-resident went up $5. Maybe that's a potential typo.
I'll double check. I think it is 35.50. So I apologize for that. That is 35 and 50.
Comments, questions?
Do you need a motion on this, or?
Yeah, this gets approved by Public Works, so I can put it in the budget.
So I make a motion that we approve the rental increases so that they can be calculated in the budget process.
Second. Any other comments or questions? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Thank you. And finally, we talked about coming back in a few months and talking about what we've learned about Brentwood Park. And I'll take a very philosophical conversation and turn it down into 5 minutes, hopefully. We've noticed things, as much as you try to look at things on paper, you notice things once the park's open. And so some of the things we've noticed, and the first one is vehicular access. We know there are places where people are getting in places that we're like, yeah, we probably should have realized that. And that's down by Hanley Road. You can get into there, drive around, and then you're on the full trail system. It's like, that's probably, we missed that one. And there's some that over by like the dumpster, there's a huge roll curve and trucks just want to go over there anyway. Things that we didn't think that would happen. I would have never thought anyone would try to turn right from the apartment complex to go down to a tunnel. So I learn new things every day. So we are looking at those things. We are going to be installing different types of devices, whether they're natural, like we have by the food truck plaza. You'll see those planters. That's a natural barrier. We like those. We want to keep them nice. Other places, we're just going to need to put a bollard. And so that's what we're looking into. The trouble is, and this is a conversation even with, I know you guys are talking a lot about Manchester Road right now and the weeds along Manchester Road, and I understand that, is that all these projects are still under construction. I mean, they still have not received final acceptance. So KCI is still responsible for everything along Manchester Road. And that is the same with every project still in the park except for GRGA. So the bollard by the apartment complex is actually the MoDOT project. So we can't really do anything until MoDOT signs off on it and gives final acceptance, or we run the risk of ruining our contract. And if you think about phase 1 and phase 2, we're very conscious of that right now. So it is something that we are looking at, and we know that there are places that we're going to have to do, but we need to make sure we go through the proper protocol, especially through contract language. So that's what we're really waiting on some of those. That would also include the striping along the apartment complex as well. So that's where we're at with those. We know we're going to be doing things. We just have to wait for the contracts to be finished. So park usage and security, as we talked about, that park is used at all hours of the day. Maybe not quite the 2 to 6 a.m. Well, 2 to 5 a.m. Is pretty dead. But if you watch the video, that's when our vent lawn gets water, so it's great. You still see things. I haven't a lot of time to watch video. I apologize. And so the one thing we noticed that it does get used and gets used after dark. And when we first did this project, it was, we hadn't talked about the park amenities yet, and we went by the GRG standard, which is they don't have lights on their trails. And now that we see the usage and we know people want to be in the park, and more importantly, we're encouraging people to come in at night for events and programs and things like that, and rentals, we're thinking about bollards from the pavilion to the tunnel at the very least. We don't think we need to go all the way down the trail system, mainly because one, that is just the trail, and we're not encouraging people to go that way. And two, once you get into that flooded area, then you worry about infrastructure. We've got a lot of requests about benches down that trail system too, and that's a whole nother conversation. We could do benches, but we'll be replacing benches a lot due to the flooding. So we're looking into different things. What we'd really like to do is a solar bollard. That way we don't have to bring in electric infrastructure. We can also use that as a good sustainable feature of our park. There's some good usage or good examples of those. We've done the research on them. It's one of the things that we just have to fit in the budget. So we'll be seeing those hopefully within the next year. Park signage, we worked a lot on park signage, and I think we have some beautiful signs. Our signs are great. GRG signs are great. You get a little bit of sign envy. Their signs are really good. But one of the things we talked about working on was a park kiosk sign. And I think I put an example of what we looked at. It's a triangular sign, so you had 3 sides. One would have the park rules and a map. The other could have whatever you want text. And in that park, we're talking about what we'd like to do is a park history. How do you celebrate the Madden Quarry? How do you celebrate the trolley? And we do that on that panel. And the third would be a panel where we could actually put upcoming events, things like that. And so that's what we're looking at. We've been hesitant. We just got that finished and got that really part where we like it. And then we know that there is discussion about branding in the communications committee. So I'd like to hold off on that until the branding's done because we changed colors. You'll notice the green and the red are very much city colors, and for whatever reason, that sort of stuff changes throughout the branding conversation. We don't want to jump the gun on that. So unless you guys want us, if you think the colors are going to remain the same and you think it's okay, we'll move forward on getting those finalized, the text finalized for the one panel and everything else. So.
I mean, I guess I should probably respond to that. I mean, I think that these are all great. Is there an alarm going off here? These are all good things that you have in your report. This particular, as far as the park map and all that, I think that is something that let's see where we get with some of the potential branding changes, and then I think this structurally and everything, changing colors or fonts or whatever, that's all something that can be easily augmented and still salvage a lot of the work that you've already done here. So
I will say that there are also, I mean, all of our parks have identifiable signage. It's the signage package that was put together before I became director. And those need to be updated as well. I mean, Brentwood Park's not on there. The sports complex called Brentwood Park. There's things that need to be changed, and we did get those updated, but we haven't did the order. We placed that on hold until we go through the branding process as well.
I think that's smart.
So.
I did have one question, and I guess it's somewhat security, park usage. Well, it's probably security. Sure. Where do we stand with the lighting in the tunnel and the energizing of that with the?
We are at Ameren's. We're at Ameren's. We're waiting for Ameren.
That wasn't tied to the same energizing line for the lights that are on the.
Nope.
On Manchester.
And they're getting close. They'd energized those when the first round of storms hit. And so all their focus had been on getting that up, and then the second round of storm hits, and then they're getting those all up. I've asked for an update from Craig to see where we're at with that, and hopefully we'll get those energized soon because I'd like to have them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you're right. I see people, I live right there. I see people walking the path all hours of the night. My kids go on a walk. They like to go walk through the tunnel. So it's definitely something that we know is going to be used, when the sun goes down. So the more light we can have in there, the better. I will say though that it's a very safe and secure access to the park, which is what we all had hoped when
yeah, I think you and I have both been down there at 1, 2 a.m. in the morning when it's been raining, and I have not felt I hadn't any concern when I've walked down there late at night.
And then just for those that might be listening to this, as it relates to the park. Yeah, nobody's listening. As it relates to the park and the cleanup along, I definitely think that we need to think long and hard about what structures we continue to put down there, because they just become, as we can see, even the trees, they become areas for debris to collect when it does flood. It's meant to flood. But as it relates to the cleanup that we're doing now, right now, we're just sort of clearing the path because, to what you were saying, is KCI is still responsible for, essentially, we're still kind of getting that debate of who's handling cleanup until everything's done.
Yeah, I think if you're talking phase 1, phase 2 in particular, the city did make the determination that staff would go down and clear off stuff off of basically in that area. I know that I've talked to my park superintendent, and we've been doing it systematically, getting stuff off the trees first, getting the stuff off close to the road. We should be in the position where we're bringing out trucks and picking it all up, chipping it up. That leaves basically any heavy log. Those will be a little bit more challenging. And then we also have to be cognizant of, we bring out heavy equipment onto that section that hasn't been approved yet, what that might do with our conversations with the contractor. So we're working on that. I think we got decently far, and then the last round of rain last week brought some more down there. But I think now that staff understands that's what we'll be doing. I know that we had staff out there Sunday clearing the trail, making sure that at least the trail was clean. I think we are as excited as anyone else to kind of get final acceptance on everything so we can take ownership and really make sure that we get everything looking good.
Yeah, I would compliment the staff. I was there Sunday morning and they were clearing it, and I saw other people, and I chatted with a few, and they know it's supposed to flood, and that's the whole design, and everybody still loves the park, so I think it's good.
So one thing I want to talk about a little bit too is programming. That leads me to my last point, which will be the biggest part of the philosophy discussion tonight. General programming is something that has been a priority for the department for the last few years. And when we say general programming, it's everything. It's youth and adult and special events, basically. And it's been, it started slow. When I first got here 10 years ago, it was really non-existent, and we slowly build, and then something would happen, a staff turnover, and we take a step back and take 2 steps forward and those type of things. We were getting into a groove right before COVID, and I thought we were really in a good spot, and then COVID hit and we went backwards again. I will say that since 2017, I could have gone a little bit further when we were only making $1,000 a year, but we've increased general programming 1,000%, and that is. The biggest reason is because of Shoa Riley, who's our recreation supervisor, who's a programmer. And in Parks and Recreation, you say programmers program. She is a programmer. She loves programming. She loves working with kids and adults. She loves reaching out for new ideas and things like that. And hopefully, while you'll see some things that we do on a regular basis, you'll hopefully been seeing new events and new things that are exciting as well. She's been helped out by Ashley, who is one of our recreation assistants. Ashley has been helping her out with general program special events because it's a huge haul. And Ashley's also responsible for senior programming, fitness programming, and rentals at the Brentwood Recreation Complex. The idea was to build to this point. We wanted to get to the point where people knew our programs, liked our programs, were impressed by our programs, so that when we went into Brentwood Park, we could build off that base. And I really think we've done so. And what we really want to kind of focus on is new exciting stuff that not only uses the new park, but then also showcases the rest of the park system. So we're not going to forget everywhere else just because we have this beautiful new park. Hopefully you guys have seen the Wine and Whiskey Walk. We've already got 25 people registered for that. That's in November. Bola claims that she and Kelly are going to sign up, so that's 27. And again, that's a partner program with the city of Clayton. So when we partner with other cities and hopefully have even bigger and better ideas and things like that. So the biggest issue we're running into is that we're nearing capacity. And that really kind of leads into what the next process is since we've been talking about Brentwood Bound, it's been my focus, and we've been talking about this with our staff, is how do we utilize the green space? How do we activate the park? And that vision has changed dramatically with the new pavilion and with the destination playground. While I think this park will be heavily utilized, and I think it will be, I think it can become an economic driver for the city. I think people are going to be coming into the city of Brentwood, Going to be stopping at exit 11, Chick-fil-A coming in the park and coming down when I mean, I told Bola from the beginning, it's like when I saw this, like, you can spend your whole day in Brentwood Park in the redevelopment area. And that is close to becoming a reality. And so what we've talked about is activating that park and doing things that not only bring in our residents, and we saw how a great activation of a park on the grand opening brings in the community together to kind of enjoy and be with each other. But we can also bring people who aren't used to Brentwood into Brentwood. You know, something going on like, hey, you know, we gotta go to Target anyway. Let's go to Brentwood, go to that Target, and then let's go to the new park, see what's going on. They have someone singing down at the park, at the amphitheater. They have someone on stilts going through. The food trucks out there. I mean, this seems like let's knock out a couple things. And so what we want to do is really talk about how we use that park to be an economic driver for sales tax, not only revenue, not only for programming, but also for sales tax. And that is something that's going to take us some time. We're going to be talking a strategic planning session here in the next couple months. But what we want to do is have this ready to go when the playground's ready to go. What that means is, you know, I don't know if you guys know, I have grandiose ideas, and none of my ideas are cheap. And I've come to know and understand that. But I think the idea of doing things that are community-related events for free that will, you know, bring some people in, doing some things that are fee-based, like the Wine Whiskey Walk, and merging those to really bring in overall usage to the park. That does come with staffing and operational expenditures. So I think what we're going to be able to do is really kind of come up with a program that we think and hopefully be able to bring it back to you guys and talk about a little bit more. It's the very quick tease of what we're going to be doing and saying, hey, if we can do this, we think this is what we can bring to the city. So that is kind of what we're doing in Parks and Recreation right now. My staff gets scared when I start talking about park activation because they're like, oh, that's just more work. But we're all very excited about it as well, so.
I would encourage you, you know, like the food truck, you know, we're probably have an opportunity there where we would have a lot of food trucks that want to come, want to be there almost all day if the playground's there. You know, maybe there's an opportunity to, you know, charge differently than I don't even know if we're charging now. Almost like a 9 mile in some respects.
Yeah, I think the food truck is always a difficult thing because food truck they want to be a place where it's busy. And so when we talk about what we've done in the past, concert, things like that, we'll get them to come. We'll also get them to cancel if they have a better chance. I think if we're able to do some of these park activation events with the playground already, with the pavilion, with the beer garden across the bridge when that comes through, I think food trucks will want to be here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think, you know, once you have 1,000 kids on this playground, you know, Kona Ice Cream is going to want to be there, you know, any chance they can.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, philosophically, I think you're on the right path. No pun intended there, but you know, I think if we can figure out a way to have more activity and then use that as even if it's a little bit of revenue generating a season or a calendar of here are revenue generating opportunities that will then help fund the free opportunities, you know, so that it becomes kind of a cost neutral thing for the city. I think it's a great way to think about it, if that's what you're thinking. I would say that we probably need to align any activation things, not just when the playground's done, but when the actual Brezu and, you know, the real entrance is there, because I think that's going to be the biggest problem we have with getting people that want to come there frequently is parking and how do I get there and, you know, all of that.
The good news is, good or bad, is we finally got approval from Union Pacific to move forward with that. I forgot what it is, Dan can help me out. I think there's a process of review with the TAP grant. So once we get through with that, we can get the bid document out. The bid document will state that the very first thing you have to do is get that entrance at Brentwood Park done. So we know that that's the priority of that project.
Okay.
So we are excited about that as well. You know, as much as I love, the redevelopment stuff, of course, the thing I loved the most was the parking. And having that partnership with the redevelopment area to be able to tell people that here's a surface lot, here's how you get to the park from that surface lot.
No, I think this looks good. I think, keep hearing things that make me think that Ways and Means is gonna be really, have a really hard time this fall. So that's what I've heard throughout the night. So I'm dreading Ways and Means and the budget process, because everything sounds amazing until we start looking at how much money there is to do it. So I will look forward to, well, maybe not look forward, but we'll be dealing with that in the budget process.
I'll make sure that meeting's at least 4 hours long.
All right, thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Citizen comment? All right, seeing no new business, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.